Chapter 58. Ouyang Zongheng narrowed his eyes and stretched his neck to see the situation inside the store. With that damned eunuch Lien Fu making a move, it should be in the bag. After all, even though that eunuch looks like a transvestite, his cultivation level is indeed formidable. A 7th grade battle saint, even though he's slightly weaker than old Xiao and only slightly stronger than me, should be able to easily capture the heavily injured Xiao Yu. Ouyang Zongheng wrinkled his nose and pursed his lips as he thought to himself. The other soldiers behind him also curiously looked inside. If they could capture Xiao Yu, it would be a joyous occasion that would shake the entire empire. They did not want to miss this moment of witnessing a miracle. Xiao Meng knitted his brows and his expression suddenly changed. True energy surged out from his body and covered his armor. A gust of wind suddenly gushed out from within the store. The gust of wind was like a dragon, and it suddenly spread out with a surge of pressure. Ouyang Zongheng's stretched neck suddenly stiffened. Then, his eyes widened as he cursed, "What the F***ck?" He turned around and hugged the little girl. Boom! The gust of wind was like a spiraling dragon as it directly bombarded his back, causing his entire body to fly. Fortunately, even though the gust of wind was violent and mixed with a bit of bad breath, Ouyang Zongheng's body was huge and the wind was weakened, so he did not embarrass himself too much. After all, Ouyang Zongheng's cultivation level was at the peak of 6th grade battle emperor. With a somersault, he handsomely landed on the ground. Ouyang Zongheng patted Ouyang Xiaoyi's head and said with a smile, "My good daughter, isn't Dad very powerful?" Ouyang Xiaoyi speechlessly rolled her eyes and snorted. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. A loud and clear dog bark that resembled the roar of an ancient ferocious beast resounded, followed by the whistling of a hurricane. 3 figures spun out of the store, accompanied by blood-curdling screams and cries of alarm. Even though Xiao Meng's hair was fluttering in the wind, his body was as steady as a boulder and he remained motionless under the gust of wind. He quickly reached out his hand to stop a figure. Xiao Meng was slightly startled. What was with this slippery feeling? General Xiao, put me down. A sharp whining voice mixed with a bit of shyness rang out. Xiao Meng expressionlessly looked at the man he had stopped with one hand, who was completely naked except for his underwear. Chief Steward Lien Fu. Xiao Meng coughed lightly, put down Lien Fu and said calmly, "Ahem. You have good skin, Grandpa." Lien Fu rolled his eyes at Xiao Meng resentfully, but his gaze toward the store was filled with shame and anger. That dog was definitely not an ordinary dog. Boom boom. Xiao Yu and Hun Qianduan were also fiercely smashed against the wall. As the two of them fell to the ground, the clothes on their bodies were torn apart by the violent wind, revealing their naked bodies. They were only wearing underwear. Xiao Yu. With a single glance, Xiao Meng saw Xiao Yu, who had been sent flying, and a monstrous killing intent instantly burst forth from his eyes. With a ferocious stomp of his foot, the bricks on the ground caved in and shattered as he charged towards Xiao Yu. Xiao Yu's entire body was covered in blood as he stood up shakily from the ground. A strange smile hung on the corner of his mouth. "Xiao Meng, you won't be able to stop me. It was the same yesterday, and it will be the same today." Just as he finished speaking, the sound of swords humming like dragons came from the sky above the alleyway. Several figures abruptly descended and blocked in front of Xiao Yu. 4 figures, 3 long swords floating in the air, and a powerful pressure suddenly exploded forth. Void Sword Pavilion. 9 Stars Monastery. Xiao Meng's pupils constricted. His figure did not stop as he punched out with an unparalleled might. The true energy seemed to be able to tear apart the air. 3 swordsmen waved their swords and 3 flying swords immediately formed a sword formation, blocking in front of them. The remaining Taoist formed a seal with his hand and shot out a stream of true energy toward Xiao Meng's fist. The 3 collided in the air and caused an astonishing shockwave. Poochie! The 4 people blocking in front of Xiao Yu all spat out a mouthful of blood and took a step back. Then, they grabbed Xiao Yu and Hun Qinduan and left. Xiao Meng's figure trembled and his entire body shook. Only then did the energy that was wrapped around his body dissipate. However, in just a short while, Xiao Yu was taken away. Damn it! As expected, Xiao Yu had a backup plan. Xiao Meng cursed in his heart. He punched the wall of the alleyway and immediately, cracks appeared on the wall. It's all because of you, big black dog. Xiao Yu was originally surrounded by us. It was impossible for him to escape. Why did you blow him out? Lian Fu was furious. He turned his head and gestured toward the store with his thumb and middle finger. Are you pointing at me with your thumb? The figure of a dog walked out of the store with cat-like steps and stood at the entrance, looking down at Lian Fu from above. That's right, I'm talking about you. Don't think that I will be afraid of you just because you succeeded in your sneak attack, Lian Fu said as he swayed his slim waist. The corners of Black's mouth slightly widened as a meaningful smile appeared on his face. Then, Lian Fu felt a surging pressure pouring down from the 9 heavens and instantly pressing down on his body. It was as if a majestic mountain was pressing down on him, and he was lying on the ground, unable to move. Lian Fu was dumbfounded. His white hair covered his entire face. How embarrassing! Xiao Meng's pupils constricted. This kind of pressure. This big black dog was actually a 9th-grade supreme spirit beast. Owner Bu, I have offended you this time. Can you ask this Lord Go to stop? Xiao Meng slightly cupped his fists and said toward the store. Bu Fong walked out from within. With his slender figure and long hair tied up with a velvet rope, he appeared extremely clean and tidy. Blackie, this lazy dog, has a bad temper. Just treat this as a lesson to the eunuch. Next time, you must remember, when you come to my place, you must follow the rules, Bu Fong expressionlessly said. After he finished speaking, Bu Fong stroked Black's smooth and untainted hair and simply said, Stop fooling around and let the eunuch go. Black turned its head and said, What if I say no? Then I will wake up a little later tomorrow and won't practice cooking. Bu Fong expressionlessly said in a serious tone. Okay, I'll let him go. Black snorted and rolled its eyes at Bu Fong. It gracefully walked back to the corner of the wall and found a comfortable spot to lie down and sleep. The corner of Bu Fong's mouth slightly twitched. So the last safeguard that the system mentioned was this lazy big black dog. As expected with the stingy nature of the system, it was impossible for it to raise a big black dog that was going to evolve into a pig. Io. Zhejia's waist. Lian Fu felt the pressure on his body disappear. He hurriedly crawled up from the ground and looked at Blackie in fear. Without saying anything, he ran away in his underwear. Blackie is so awesome. Ouyang Xiaoyi happily clapped her hands and squinted her eyes into the shape of a crescent moon. He's much stronger than Dad. General Ouyang Zongheng felt as if an invisible arrow had pierced through his heart. In his obedient daughter's eyes, he was already inferior to a dog. Thank you, Owner Bu. Xiao Meng solemnly expressed his gratitude. Then, he took a deep look at Blackie, who was snoring away, and turned around to leave. Since Xiao Yu and Hun Qianduan's plan to hunt him down had failed, it was time for him, Xiao Meng, to return and report to the Emperor. Immediately, all the experts in the alleyway retreated like a receding tide. Ouyang Xiaoyi was also brought back by Ouyang Zongheng. Before the little lowly left, she even happily waved at Bu Fong. After everyone had left, Bu Fong glanced at Blackie, who was snoring away, before entering the house and closing the door. Your Majesty, you have to uphold justice for this servant. That unscrupulous store was truly impudent and had no respect for the law. They actually dared to shield a sect criminal. When this servant made a move, they even stripped this servant of his clothes. Lian Fu complained to Ji Chongfeng, who was sitting on the dragon throne, as she pinched her thumb and middle finger in an aggrieved manner. She looked like a weeping beauty. The emperor merely chuckled and comforted Lien Fu with a few words. His gaze then fell on Xiao Meng, who was standing upright in the middle of the hall. General Xiao, is that store really as magical as you say? Is it overseen by a 9th-grade supreme spirit beast? Everything this humble servant has said is the truth, Xiao Meng solemnly said. The emperor narrowed his eyes and lightly stroked his white beard. He faintly smiled and said, I heard that the dishes of that store are very delicious. There's even a wine that's rumored to be even better than the bejeweled nectar wine? I am truly a little curious. Chapter 59. One autumn rain, one cold. 10 autumn rains put on cotton. After a few rounds of autumn rain, the temperature in the imperial city gradually dropped. The autumn wind also began to turn bone-chilling. When Bufang woke up early in the morning, he was so cold that he did not want to leave his bed. After washing up, Bufang wrapped himself in a thick coat and opened the door. The cold wind quickly squeezed in and drilled into his back along his neck. He immediately felt a piercing chill. Bufang rubbed his hands and lightly sucked in a breath of cold air. Glancing at Blackie, who was lying on the ground, Bufang curled his lips. This lazy dog! It only knew how to sleep all day long. Why didn't it have any awareness of being a supreme spirit beast? Shouldn't it be standing majestically at the entrance to raise the store's prestige? Kid, this Lord Go wants to eat sweet and sour ribs. Blackie opened its sleepy eyes and lazily said to Bufang. Its voice was not very old, but it had a kind of manly aura and was full of magnetism. Bufang raised his eyebrows. You lazy dog. You eat and drink for free and now you're ordering dishes? Blackie rolled its eyes and ignored Bufang. It lowered its head and just lay on the ground. Its meaning was obvious. Cook it if you want. Bufang was furious. This lazy dog actually dared to ignore me. Isn't it afraid that I'll add a big spoon of abyssal chili sauce to the sweet and sour ribs? It's so spicy that you want to die. Bufang turned around and walked back into the kitchen. Even though he said that he did not want to help Blackie cook sweet and sour ribs, Blackie's help yesterday was still a great help. Therefore, Bufang reluctantly agreed to his request this time. He took out some of the main ingredients needed to cook sweet and sour ribs from the fridge: the ribs of the flying cloud pig, some starch, and a sauce. Bufang placed the rib on the wooden chopping board and waved his hand forward. Immediately, a kitchen knife that was flickering with a cold light spun in his hand. After twirling the knife for a few times, Bufang quickly slapped the back of the kitchen knife onto the rib. First, he patted the meat to loosen it up a little. This way, it would be easier to chop the meat. After practicing the meteor cutting technique for so many days, Bufang's cutting technique had also improved qualitatively. Only a flash of light could be seen as the kitchen knife ruthlessly chopped the tenderloin meat. The first time he cooked the sweet and sour ribs, Bufang found it very difficult to chop the meat. Now, with the improvement of his knife skill, chopping the meat became a lot easier. He chopped the ribs of the rushing cloud boar brimming with spirit energy into pieces and placed them into the starch paste that he had just prepared, causing every piece of meat to be wrapped in starch. He poured half a wok of oil into it and waited for the rising steam to burn his hands. Then, he placed the meat wrapped in starch paste into the wok. Sizzle! The meat in the wok was boiling and an aroma wafted out from it. After all of the meat was fried, Bufang placed them into a large bowl and mixed the tangerine sauce with it. Finally, he placed them on a plate. Blackie, it's time to eat, Bufang said softly as he walked out of the kitchen while carrying the sweet and sour ribs. Blackie's half-squinted eyes immediately lit up. Its nose twitched and it stuck out its tongue as it impatiently gazed at the sweet and sour ribs in Bufang's hands. Bufang placed the sweet and sour ribs in front of Blackie. Blackie wagged its tail and gobbled down the ribs. The corners of Bufang's mouth curled up as he stroked Blackie's smooth fur. He stood up and pulled a chair to sit at the entrance of the store as he leisurely basked in the sun. Even though a battle between the Empire's top experts took place in the store yesterday, for Bufang, there was not much of a change in his life. The late autumn sun was even warmer and more comfortable. Under the illumination of the sunlight, the fragrance emitted by his clothes was intoxicating. What a beautiful day it was! In the distance, Fatty Jean and a group of people were majestically walking over. Fatty Jean, who was leading the group, was limping and his fat face was slightly swollen. "Good morning, Owner Boo." Basking in the sun, how leisurely, Fatty Jean greeted Bufang. Bufang nodded his head and stared at him with a puzzled expression as he said, "Why is your face swollen? You are already very fat, there is no need to beat your face until it's swollen." "Owner Boo, can we still have a proper conversation? This is all because of you." Speaking of the injury on his face, Fatty Jin's eyes were filled with resentment. "Your oyster pancake was too fragrant." Fatty Jean told Bufang everything that happened on the execution ground yesterday, causing Bufang to be slightly dazed. It turned out that the oyster pancake's first appearance yesterday was already so amazing. "You did such an inhumane thing, why didn't he beat you to death?" Bufang stood up and loosened his muscles as he calmly said. Then, he walked toward the kitchen. Fatty Jean did not know whether to laugh or cry. This Owner Boo had actually learned to mock others. "Owner Boo, today's meal is the same as usual." Bufang waved his hand to indicate that he understood. Not long after, a rich aroma wafted out of the kitchen. Ouyang Xiaoyi skipped over. She was in a good mood today. "Yo, Fatty Jean, what are you trying to do by slapping your face until it's swollen?" Once Ouyang Xiaoyi entered the store and saw Fatty Jin's miserable appearance, she immediately laughed out loud with malicious intentions. Fatty Jean immediately let out a bitter smile. Under Ouyang Xiaoyi's continuous questioning, he once again told the story of the oyster pancake. "Is that oyster pancake really that delicious? Then I'll have to ask the smelly boss to cook one later. I'll bring it back for my parents and grandfather to try," Ouyang Xiaoyi thought to herself. "Xiaoyi, serve the dishes," Bufang calmly shouted when he heard the laughter coming from the store. He knew that Ouyang Xiaoyi had arrived. "Hey!" Ouyang Xiaoyi eagerly ran to the window and served the dishes that Fatty Jean and the others had ordered. After Fatty Jean and the others were satisfied with their meal, they paid the bill and left. Before leaving, they naturally gave each of them a serving of oyster pancake. Ji Qingxue elegantly walked over in a white robe. He was a regular customer of the store and always had a gentle smile on his face. "Your Highness, what would you like to eat?" Ouyang Xiaoyi asked. "A serving of Li's fish and a jar of ice heart jade urn wine," Ji Qingxue chuckled. Not long after, the dishes were served. Ji Qingxue contentedly poured himself a cup of Li's fish and drank the ice heart jade urn wine. At the entrance of the alleyway, a white-haired figure swayed his waist as he walked over. "Io, my little heart. Why are you still here, you dog? You are a supreme spirit beast after all. Can you show off the domineering aura of a supreme spirit beast?" Lian Fu was wearing casual clothes today. His white hair was tied up with a bronze crown and his face was fair and clean. When he saw Blackie, he felt a chill in his heart. He pinched his thumb and middle finger and snorted. Blackie could not be bothered with this damned eunuch. It slowly gnawed on the sweet and sour ribs with a face full of enjoyment. The aroma permeated the air. It's really fragrant," Lian Fu mumbled as he waved his thumb and middle finger. Blackie's figure paused and vigilantly glanced at the damned eunuch. It then turned around and faced Lian Fu with but as it continued to gnaw on its sweet and sour ribs. Rare. Lian Fu was furious. It was as if he, the chief steward, was fighting over food with a dog. Lian Fu haughtily snorted and walked into Bufang's store while twisting his waist. He did not come today to cause trouble, nor was he here to arrest anyone. He was here purely to buy groceries. His Majesty, the Emperor, had given him an imperial edict yesterday, instructing him to pack up all of the dishes in the store and bring them back for the emperor to have a taste. If the taste was acceptable, Bufang would be recruited into the imperial palace. He's just a little chef in an alleyway. How could he compare to the chefs of the imperial kitchen? Lien Fu did not care about today's mission. Oh my! Your Highness, why are you here? Oh my, isn't this our General Ouyang's little princess? As soon as he entered the store, Lien Fu's eyes immediately lit up when he saw Ji Qingxue, who was drinking wine and eating meat, as well as the pretty Ouyang Xiaoyi not far away. Eunuch Lien, why are you here today? Ji Qingxue was slightly surprised. Lien Fu was his father's personal eunuch. It was truly strange for him to actually come to the store today. Your Highness might not know this, but His Majesty ordered me to pack up all of the dishes in the store and bring them back to the imperial palace. Am I not here now? It's hard to disobey the emperor's orders. Pack up? Ji Qingxue nodded as he looked at Lien Fu with a strange expression. Chapter 60. Are you really here to pack? Ji Qingxue looked at Lien Fu with a strange expression, a trace of ridicule in his eyes. That's right, His Majesty said he wanted to eat, so I hurried over. Even though I don't think there's anything delicious about this store's dishes, could it be better than the Immortal Phoenix restaurant and the Imperial kitchen? Lien Fu nonchalantly said as he pinched his thumb and middle finger and stroked the white bangs in front of his forehead. Ji Qingxue had already finished eating. He calmly stood up and solemnly said to Lien Fu, No, Gonggong, you are wrong. Owner Bu's culinary skills are definitely top-notch. His culinary skills are worthy of his asking price. Lien Fu was slightly taken aback. The third prince actually held this store in such high regard. It seemed like this store was quite capable. I hope so. Oh right, didn't His Majesty send you on an expedition against the sects? When will the third prince set off? Lien Fu seemed to have suddenly thought of something and asked Ji Qingxue. In a few days. Ji Qingxue seemed to be uninterested in this question. He lightly sighed and did not say anything else. After paying the crystals, he packed up an oyster pancake and left the store. Gonggong, what do you want to eat? Ouyang Xiaoyi charmingly asked Lien Fu. Lien Fu twisted his waist, sat on a seat, crossed his legs and asked with a smile, What delicious food do you have here? Ouyang Xiaoyi pointed at the wall behind Lien Fu and seriously said, Gonggong, look behind you, the menu is on the wall. Lien Fu was slightly taken aback. He turned around and immediately saw the menu, as well as the sky-high priced dishes. Oh! As expected of the black-hearted restaurant that is famous in the imperial city. A serving of egg-fried rice for 10 crystals, this is simply faster than robbing people. Lien Fu raised his eyebrows, and his sharp voice carried a trace of ridicule. Bufang walked out of the kitchen, wiped off the water stains on his hands and expressionlessly glanced at Lien Fu. The prices are clearly marked and we treat everyone equally. If you don't want to eat, don't eat, Bufang lightly said. Heh! Little chef, your strength isn't much, but your temper is quite bad. Do you think I'm doing this because of the price? I have plenty of money, enough to buy 10 of your shops. Lien Fu snorted and said. No. Your money is not enough to buy the restaurant, Bufang answered earnestly. I'm not going to argue with a country bumpkin like you. Do you know how much I'm worth? If you were piled up into a pile of gold coins, you would be crushed to death. Lien Fu pinched his thumb and middle finger together, picking his nails as he looked at Bufang in disdain. Let's not talk anymore. Serve me the dishes first. Serve all the dishes once. If they're delicious, pack a portion for me. This restaurant doesn't accept takeout service. You can only take one dish out, Bufang answered expressionlessly. Lien Fu was slightly taken aback. He looked seriously at Bufang and realized that Bufang's serious expression did not seem to be fake. Immediately, he became angry. I told you to pack it up, so pack it up. What's with all this nonsense? Lien Fu put down his legs, put one hand on his waist, and pointed at Bufang with the other as he snorted. You want to cause trouble? Bufang frowned and said indifferently. Lien Fu's body immediately stiffened. He glanced at Blackie, who was lying at the entrance, snorting and chewing on the sweet and sour ribs. When he thought of the terrifying scene of that black dog blowing away his clothes with a single breath, his entire body trembled. I'm not causing trouble. Serve a dish first and let me have a taste. Lien Fu pouted but still gave in. What do you want to eat? Didn't I say it already? Serve all of them, Lien Fu answered somewhat impatiently. Bufang expressionlessly looked at him and said, Are you sure? Lien Fu did not say anything else. Bufang nodded, turned around, and entered the kitchen to start cooking. Soon, the rich aroma of egg-fried rice drifted out of the restaurant. First dish, ordinary egg-fried rice. Xiaoyi served the dish. Bufang's indifferent voice came from the kitchen. Xiaoyi eagerly ran to the window and brought the fragrant egg-fried rice to Lien Fu. She placed the egg-fried rice on the table and charmingly said, Your egg-fried rice, please enjoy. Lien Fu nodded. His gaze fell on the egg-fried rice and his eyes immediately lit up. He felt as if the egg-fried rice in front of him was glowing. Using a blue and white porcelain spoon to lightly scoop up a spoonful, the golden egg liquid was pulled apart and turned into a thread. An even more surging aroma gushed out from the egg-fried rice and assaulted Lien Fu's nostrils, causing him to involuntarily take a deep breath. Smells so good. Looks like there's something to it. Lien Fu muttered as he placed the egg-fried rice and the spoon into his mouth. The rich aroma instantly burst forth, and the smooth egg liquid instantly solidified in his mouth. It was filled with elasticity as it slapped against his taste buds, causing his entire body to become intoxicated. So delicious. Lien Fu could no longer stop after taking a bite. He continuously scooped more egg-fried rice into his mouth. Ouyang Xiaoyi looked at Lien Fu's expression and pursed her lips into a smile as she said, Father-in-law, eat slowly, no one is going to fight with you. There are still many more dishes to come. Boo-hoo, so delicious. Lien Fu continuously nodded as he replied. A grain of golden rice sprayed out and fell onto the table. Lien Fu's eyes immediately widened as he hurriedly picked it up and stuffed it into his mouth. Second dish, improved egg-fried rice. Xiaoyi served the dish. Bufang's voice sounded out once again. Another dish was completed. When Lien Fu ate a mouthful of the improved egg-fried rice, the expression in his eyes changed. The rich spirit energy circulating within the egg-fried rice made him feel incredulous. It was even more useful than eating an elixir. Third dish, dry mixed noodles and stir-fried vegetables. Fourth dish, fish head tofu soup. Xiaoyi served the dish. Eighth dish, sweet and sour ribs. Xiaoyi served the dish. Bufang's voice sounded out once again. Ouyang Xiaoyi cheerfully ran over to serve the dish. Burp. Why is there more? It smells so good. Burp. Lien Fu's stomach was extremely full, but his mouth could not stop moving. Just as he swallowed the last piece of fragrant golden shumai, the sweet and sour ribs that was emitting a rich meaty aroma was served. The orange-red color of the sweet and sour ribs greatly stimulated one's appetite. Even though Lien Fu had already eaten a lot of dishes, he still could not help but stretch out his chopsticks when he smelled the aroma. As a piece of sweet and sour ribs entered his mouth, the enchanting taste of the sauce spread in his mouth and instantly caused Lien Fu to become intoxicated by the rich meaty aroma of the ribs. Ah! So delicious! Lien Fu could not help but mutter as he stuck out his thumb and middle finger. Gong, do you still think that the smelly boss's dishes are inferior to the Immortal Phoenix restaurants? Ouyang Xiaoyi asked in a calm and composed manner with her arms crossed as she looked at Lien Fu, who was completely captivated by the delicacies. After Lien Fu finished eating the sweet and sour ribs, he took out a handkerchief and lightly dabbed at his lips while occasionally burping. I admit it, Burp, the taste is indeed not bad and is worthy of the price. Furthermore, these dishes contain a rich amount of spirit energy and can even assist in cultivation. The price is also considered fair, Lien Fu said as he smacked his lips and nodded. It's indeed not bad. I never thought that a little chef like you would actually have such culinary skills. It's my fault for underestimating you, Lien Fu sincerely praised as he glanced in astonishment at Bufang, who had just walked out of the kitchen. When someone praised his culinary skills, Bufang naturally gladly accepted it and nodded his head in response. Very good. Little chef, pack up another portion of these dishes for me, Lien Fu said. As Lien Fu spoke, he rubbed the jade pendant hanging on his waist. Immediately, numerous yuan crystals appeared. According to the store's rules, each person is only allowed to order each dish once. Takeout is not accepted. Oh, the only takeout dish allowed now is the oyster pancake, Bufang expressionlessly said as he glanced at the crystals on the table. Chapter 61. Do you know who I am going to pack it for? Lien Fu did not expect Bufang to reject his request once again. This made him a little angry. Do you know that His Majesty wants to eat your dishes? This is a supreme honor. Bufang furrowed his eyebrows and looked at the arrogant Lien Fu with displeasure. He had already made it so clear that the store did not provide takeout service. Why did this eunuch not understand? Tell me, how much do I need for takeout? Name your price. When Lien Fu saw Bufang's unwavering attitude, he became exasperated. He flicked his thumb and middle finger and snorted. Do you still not understand what I said? Bufang expressionlessly glanced at him and ignored the eunuch. He turned around and returned to the kitchen to bring out the last dish. The golden oyster pancake, which was wrapped in a wide bamboo leaf, had a hidden aroma. This is the last dish, the oyster pancake. This can be taken out. Bring it back for the emperor to eat, Bufang calmly said after passing the oyster pancake to Lien Fu. Lien Fu was stunned. He subconsciously took it and glanced at the oyster pancake wrapped in the bamboo leaf. Even though it was fragrant, compared to the gorgeous fish head tofu soup, this oyster pancake was really too shabby. He had eaten so many delicacies, but in the end, he only brought back this shabby oyster pancake. Would he be scolded to death by His Majesty? Little chef, I really can't take it out? I can't even pay 100 crystals? Lien Fu bit his lips and resentfully looked at Bufang. Bufang's entire body trembled. His entire body was covered in goosebumps from Lien Fu's gaze. He tightened his neck and turned around to return to the kitchen, completely ignoring Chief Eunuch Lien Fu. Lien Fu looked at the departing Bufang and sighed. His face was filled with worry as he stared at the oyster pancake in his hand. In the end, he could only helplessly leave. After watching Eunuch Lien Fu leave, Ouyang Xiaoi excitedly went in front of Bufang. Smelly boss, give me an oyster pancake, Ouyang Xiaoi charmingly shouted. You want to eat it now? Bufang was slightly stunned and asked doubtfully. Didn't Xiaoi say that she would bring it to her parents when she returned? Ouyang Xiaoi swallowed her saliva and said with a grin, I can't help it anymore. Let's taste it for them first. Well, although Bufang could tell at a glance that this girl was greedy, he didn't say anything and just asked her to wait. After a short while, 2 servings of oyster pancakes were ready. After handing a portion to the little girl and taking one for himself, the two of them leisurely pulled over chairs and sat at the entrance of the store as they began to eat the oyster pancake. Pushing aside the bamboo leaves, Ouyang Xiaoi somewhat impatiently took a bite of the oyster pancake. With a crisp, crunching sound, the crispy skin instantly entered her mouth. The juice of the radish flowed out and mixed into her mouth. The texture was extremely delicious. A rich fragrance wafted out from the oyster pancake and enveloped the surroundings of the little girl. She shook her head with an intoxicated expression and continued to bury herself in the oyster pancake. 1 adult and 1 child were curled up on the chair, eating the oyster pancake. The fragrance slowly drifted and lingered in the alley. "Your Majesty, this is the delicacy this old servant brought back from the black-hearted store, the oyster pancake." Lien Fu was carrying a silver plate that was engraved with many exquisite patterns. 2 golden hemispherical oyster pancakes were placed on the silver plate. They were still emitting a little steam, and a faint fragrance lingered above them. Emperor Ji Chongfeng lightly stroked his long beard as he puzzledly looked at Lien Fu and asked, "Xiao Fu, didn't I tell you to take away all of the dishes? Why did you only bring back such a small thing for me?" If the oyster pancake was not eaten, its appearance would not be very good. It looked a little like the lumps that commoners ate. When Lien Fu heard the emperor's question, his heart immediately trembled. With a long face he complained, "Your Majesty, you might not know, but the owner of the black-hearted store said that the other dishes are not allowed to be taken away. The only dish that can be taken away is the oyster pancake." "Then have you tasted the other dishes?" Ji Chongfeng gave Lien Fu a sidelong glance and lightly asked. "Yes, the taste was very good. Especially the sweet and sour ribs." Your Majesty, this old servant was wrong. Lien Fu originally wanted to describe the delicacies at Bu Fang's store. However, when he felt the faint smile on the emperor's face, his heart immediately trembled. He took a step back and bowed to admit his mistake. "It seems that the culinary skills of the owner of the store are pretty good. Otherwise, you would not praise him so highly." "Then, today I will try this oyster pancake," Ji Chongfeng said. Lien Fu was immediately overjoyed. It was good that His Majesty did not blame him. He hurriedly straightened his body and passed the silver plate to Ji Chongfeng. He also took out a small silver dagger. Lien Fu rolled up his wide sleeves and held the small silver dagger. He gently cut an oyster pancake into 2 halves. After the oyster pancake, which originally had very little fragrance, was cut open, a rich fragrance instantly burst forth. It was as if a fragrant bomb had been stepped on. White juice flowed out from the cut and dripped onto half of the silver plate. When Ji Chongfeng smelled the aroma of the oyster pancake, his eyes immediately lit up. He could not help but exclaim, "Fragrant but not pungent. Mellow but lingering. Good." Lien Fu was also extremely astonished. He did not think that the unassuming oyster pancake would actually be so fragrant. With such a rich fragrance, the taste should not be bad either. Ji Chongfeng stretched out his hand and picked up half of the oyster pancake. As he looked at the plump oyster, he could not help but take a bite. The freshness of the oyster unreservedly blossomed in his mouth and instantly rushed into his nostrils, causing all the pores on his body to open up. The crispy and perfectly fried skin coupled with the tenderness of the shredded radish gave Ji Chongfeng an unprecedented taste. He could not help but exclaim in admiration, "Delicious! What a good oyster pancake!" Lien Fu swallowed his saliva. His heart was also filled with joy. He thought, "As long as Your Majesty is happy. I'm just afraid that Your Majesty will find this old servant to settle the score if you are unhappy." After half of the oyster pancake entered his stomach, Ji Chongfeng could not help but lick his lip. He wiped off the grease on his beard and picked up the remaining half of the oyster pancake. In a short while, he finished it. After he finished eating, Ji Chongfeng finally let out a sigh of relief with a satisfied expression on his face. "It's been a long time since I've had such a good meal. This black-hearted store is indeed capable. I'm suddenly curious about the other delicacies." "Your Majesty, that store does not allow takeout. If we want to eat, we will have to go there personally." Lien Fu was a little angry. "So what if I go there personally? This kind of delicacy is worth my time. Besides, doesn't that store have wine that's even better than my bejeweled nectar wine? I've always yearned for good wine. Xiao Fu, make some preparations. I'll personally make a trip there tomorrow." "Oh my! Your Majesty? How could that store dare to trouble you? This old servant will go there again tomorrow, and I'll definitely bring back all of the dishes." Lien Fu was a little anxious. Given His Majesty's health, how could he make such a big fuss? Ji Changfeng indifferently glanced at Lien Fu and said, Xiao Fu, the reason why I went to the Immortal Phoenix restaurant back then was for a roasted flower duck. Why can't I enter the store to taste the delicacies now? Remember, we'll head there incognito tomorrow. Lien Fu felt helpless in his heart. He had already made up his mind to secretly arrange for the imperial physicians and so on. If anything happened, they would at least be able to take care of him. At that moment, in Fang Fang's little store, Ouyang Xiaoyi, who had just finished eating 2 oyster pancakes, was pitifully looking at Bu Fang. Smelly boss, just give Xiaoyi another portion. Xiaoyi hasn't had enough. Her big eyes blinked and she was so lovely that it could melt a person's heart. Bu Fang gave her a glance and simply said, No, I ate too much oyster pancake. It's too hot. Chapter 62. Host, Bu Fang Gender, Male Age, 20 True Energy Cultivation Level. 3rd grade, has reached the level of releasing true energy. As the god of cooking in the fantasy world, future food will definitely require true energy. Young man, work hard. Cooking talent. Unknown skills. Level 1 meteor cutting technique, 52 out of 100 tools. Fragment of the God of Cooking set, 3/4. God of Cooking overall rating. Apprentice chef, can finally cook ingredients with true energy and start learning cutting technique. The road to the God of Cooking is open for you. Work hard, young man. Current sales volume of crystals, 2,880 crystals. True energy conversion, 720/1000 system level. 3 stars. True energy conversion ratio is at 25%. Customers are allowed to bring ingredients lower than 4th grade. The next morning, Bu Fang sleepily got out of bed. As he was washing up, his mind sank into the system and looked at the panel. After checking the progress of his true energy, he realized that he would be able to complete the upgrade soon. He was currently a 3rd grade battle maniac. Once he reached a value of 1,000 crystals, he would be able to reach battle spirit. At that time, his control of true energy would become more proficient. What exactly is that God of Cooking set? I'm really curious. However, I've already collected 3 pieces. I should be able to collect all of them after the next upgrade, Bu Fang muttered to himself as he walked down the stairs. Then, he went to the kitchen and began his daily training of cutting radishes. After cutting the radishes, Bu Fang walked to the entrance of the store and opened the door. The air seemed to have become even colder and the cold wind was slightly bone-chilling as it hit his face. After glancing at the snoring Blackie, Bu Fang turned around and returned to the kitchen. After training for a bit, the fragrant sweet and sour ribs was ready to be cooked. Blackie, it's time to eat. Bu Fang placed the sweet and sour ribs in front of Blackie. Blackie immediately became energetic. Fatty Jean and his army of fatties came as usual and left after eating breakfast. Coming to Bu Fang's place to eat seemed to have become a habit for them. Even though Bu Fang's dishes were expensive, Fatty Jean was a tycoon. He did not lack money. Ever since Xiao Yu was blown out of the store by Black's sneeze, he had never returned. It was as if he had completely evaporated from the imperial city. However, Bu Fang did not mind. At most, he felt that it was a pity that there was one less customer. In the alleyway, a bone-chilling autumn wind blew. Ji Qingxue, dressed in a white robe, slowly walked over. His face was fair and gentle, and his eyes were slightly squinted, as if he was constantly smiling. "Good morning, Owner Bu." Ji Qingxue greeted Bu Fang warmly. Bu Fang nodded his head lightly and responded with a soft "N." "Your Highness, why are you here so early today?" Ouyang Xiaoyi looked at Ji Qingxue, who had just stepped into the store, and asked in puzzlement. Ji Qingxue patted Xiaoyi's head and chuckled. "Big brother wants to eat Owner Bu's dishes as soon as possible today." "What are we eating today?" Bu Fang asked. "Give me a portion of every dish." After this time, I don't know if I will have the chance to taste Honorbu's cooking again, Ji Qingxue said with a sigh. What's wrong? Bu Fang asked in puzzlement. Ouyang Xiaoyi was also looking at Ji Qingxue with a strange expression. Ji Qingxue's gaze was a little gloomy. He simply said, "Nothing, it's just some family matters. I will be leaving the imperial city tomorrow. As for when I will return, I'm not sure either." Got it. Wait here. Bu Fang expressionlessly nodded his head. He turned around and entered the kitchen. Then, he came out with a jar of Iceheart jade urn wine and directly tossed it to Ji Qingxue. Ji Qingxue caught the wine and was slightly startled. Then, he gently smiled, removed the seal, and poured a cup of wine. Bu Fang also poured a cup. He raised his cup and lightly clinked it with Ji Qingxue, saying, "I wish you a pleasant journey." "Ha, thank you, Honorbu." "Then, can today's meal be free of charge? Or a discount?" Ji Qingxue drank the wine in his cup in one gulp and lightly laughed. Bu Fang indifferently glanced at him and expressionlessly refused. "No." Then, Bu Fang turned around and returned to the kitchen to start cooking other dishes. The sound of footsteps once again came from the alleyway. 3 figures slowly approached. "Your Highness is so elegant. You've arrived so early." Xiao Meng slightly bowed toward Ji Qingxue with a straight face. Behind him were the Xiao siblings, Xiao Xiaolong and Xiao Yinyu. Xiao Yinyu's complexion was much better. It seemed like the sage herb phoenix chicken soup had taken effect. "General Xiao, you must be joking. Aren't we leaving for the war tomorrow? I'm here to eat Honorbu's food for the last time so that I won't get greedy in the army." Ji Qingxue chuckled. He also prepared a cup for Xiao Meng and poured him a cup of wine. Xiao Meng was silent for a moment. He lightly sighed and received Ji Qingxue's cup of wine. The two of them sat down and drank with each other. Ouyang Xiaoyi reported the names of the dishes ordered by the Xiao family to Bu Fang. Bu Fang indicated that he understood. One after another, fragrant dishes were carried out by Ouyang Xiaoyi and placed on the table. These were all ordered by Ji Qingxue. He was extremely satisfied while drinking wine and eating the delicious dishes. "General Xiao, I wonder how my elder sister is doing recently?" Ji Qingxue lightly sipped a mouthful of wine and looked at Xiao Meng with a complicated gaze. Xiao Meng slightly furrowed his brows. He raised his head and drank the wine in his cup in one gulp. He lightly exhaled and dejectedly said, "She's still the same. She's in a state of suspended animation. Even the imperial physicians can't tell what's wrong. It's been 3 years. I wonder when Ru'er will wake up. Elder sister is a virtuous person. She will wake up one day," Ji Qingxue consoled. Ji Ru'er, Ji Qingxue's elder sister, was also Xiao Meng's wife and Xiao Yu's mother. 3 years ago, Xiao Yu sacrificed his mother's heart's blood to his sword and comprehended the true essence of the way of the sword, causing Ji Ru'er to fall into a coma. Now that 3 years had passed, Ji Ru'er still showed no signs of waking up. During these 3 years, Xiao Meng had searched the entire Light Wind Empire for all sorts of miraculous doctors in order to save Ji Ru'er. However, he had yet to succeed. For this matter, even a 7th-grade battle saint like him was so worried that his hair had turned white. For someone with such a high cultivation level, this was simply inconceivable. Actually, I don't dare to ask for too much. Even though Ru'er is in a coma, she's not dead. This is already a good thing for me. The reason I came here today is to ask Honorbu if there's any way to save Ru'er. I'm just trying everything in a desperate situation." Xiao Meng frankly told Ji Qingxue the purpose of his visit. Ji Qingxue nodded. Bu Fang's medicinal cuisine could allow Xiao Yinyu, who was on the verge of death, to recover from the severe loss of her life force. It might be able to save his elder sister, who had been in a coma for 3 years. A glimmer of hope involuntarily emerged in his heart. Afterward, the two of them no longer spoke and continued drinking. During this time, Xiao Meng only warned Ji Qingxue about some matters regarding the expedition. Even though Ji Qingxue was a prince, he was still the third son. His mother was only an imperial concubine in the imperial harem and did not have a noble status. She could not compare to the crown prince, Ji Qinggan, and King Yu, Ji Qingyu. The emperor did not think highly of him either. If it were not for Xiaomeng, his brother-in-law, Ji Qingxue might have been killed by the crown prince and King Yu a long time ago. The imperial family had no relatives. This was not a casual saying. When you go on an expedition to a foreign sect, you must ensure your own safety. You must remember, even though the emperor does not think highly of you, you are still a prince, a noble prince, Xiaomeng seriously said. Ji Qingxue simply nodded and raised his head to drink. Just as the two of them were drinking and chatting, the sound of a cough came from outside the door. An elderly figure wearing a brocade robe slowly walked into the store. Ji Qingxue and Xiaomeng's gazes naturally fell on the person who had just arrived. Their expressions immediately stiffened and then their pupils constricted, filled with disbelief. Chapter 63. Xiaomeng and Ji Qingxue stared at the newcomer in astonishment, their eyes filled with disbelief. "Your Majesty, why are you here?" Xiaomeng hurriedly stood up and walked forward to welcome him. The astonishment on his face had yet to dissipate. It was truly unexpected that the emperor would come to such a small store in the corner of an alleyway with his majestic and supreme body. "Greetings, father." Ji Qingxue also stood up and bowed to the elder in embroidered robes. Even though the elder's hair was white, he was in good spirits. He wore an embroidered robe and his hair was held in place by a green jade hairpin. With his hands behind his back, he was filled with nobility and elegance. "General Xiao? Qingxue? Are you guys eating in this store as well? Looks like the delicacies here are pretty good." Ji Changfeng faintly smiled and stepped into the store. He coughed as he walked and his body trembled, giving off the feeling that he had one foot in the grave. Xiaomeng hurriedly protected the emperor, fearing that something might happen to him. "Your Majesty, why did you leave the palace alone? It's not safe. Even though most of the experts from the sects in the imperial city have retreated, there might still be some lurking around," Xiaomeng said anxiously. The emperor waved his hand and faintly said, "It's fine. Ji Changfeng was a figure that intimidated the world back then. Even though I'm old, I'm not someone that any Tom, Dick, or Harry would dare to approach. Today, I'm only here to talk about delicacies and nothing else." The emperor sat on a chair and looked around. The store was not big. A few tables were neatly arranged and the surroundings were decorated warmly. It was quite charming. The emperor twitched his nose and his gaze fell on where Xiaomeng and Ji Qingxue were sitting. His eyes slightly brightened as he said, "This wine is really fragrant. Could this be the wine in this store that's even better than the bejeweled nectar wine?" "Yes, Your Majesty. This is a fine wine unique to this store, the Ice Heart Jade Urn wine. One jar costs 15 crystals, Xiaomeng said with a nod. 15 crystals. That's not cheap. However, I'm a little impatient. Where's the owner? I want to see him and order some dishes, the emperor asked. Ouyang Xiaoyi timidly looked at the emperor with her big round eyes. When she heard the emperor's words, she turned to the kitchen window and shouted, "Smelly boss, the emperor grandpa wants to see you." Who is it?" From the kitchen came the sound of stir-frying, mixed with Bu Fang's indifferent voice. "Grandpa Emperor," Ouyang Xiaoyi repeated seriously. "Oh, let him wait." Bu Fang's indifferent voice drifted out from the room. His words, however, made Ouyang Xiaoyi dumbfounded. The little loli was so angry. Every time she talked to the smelly boss, she felt like she was going to vomit blood. The person who wanted to see him was the emperor, the #1 person in the Light Wind Empire, the highest ruler of the Light Wind Empire. What did he mean by asking him to wait? When Ji Changfeng and the others heard the entire conversation between Bu Fang and Ouyang Xiaoyi, their expressions were indescribably marvelous. Xiaomeng and Ji Qingxue didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This owner Bu's temper was still as eccentric as ever. He didn't even give face to the emperor. Ji Chongfeng, on the other hand, was amused. Normally, when chefs heard his name, they would come over to fawn over him. Unlike Bu Fang, who didn't even care about him. This owner has character. Ji Chongfeng stroked his beard and smiled. Xiao Meng and Ji Qingxue also awkwardly smiled in agreement. Finally, after a few minutes, Bu Fang walked out of the kitchen with a plate of sweet and sour ribs in his hand. The rich aroma of meat wafted out from the dish and wafted through the entire store. The orange-red color of the sweet and sour ribs greatly increased one's appetite. "Your sweet and sour ribs, please enjoy," Bu Fang said as he placed the plate on Ji Qingxue's table. Then, he turned around and looked at the elderly man sitting on the chair. This person should be the Emperor Grandpa that Ouyang Xiaoyi mentioned. "Hello, Emperor," Bu Fang expressionlessly said. Everyone was stunned. The Emperor was stunned for a moment, then stroked his beard and laughed. "Hello, young man. Are you the owner of this store? What was the name of that dish just now? It smells really good." The Emperor had a gentle smile on his face as he looked at Bu Fang. He felt that this owner was very interesting. "Oh, the name of this dish is sweet and sour ribs. It is currently the most expensive dish in the store," Bu Fang simply said. "Sweet and sour ribs. The fragrance of sweet and sour ribs is intoxicating. It is indeed worthy of its name. Good." The Emperor nodded and chuckled. The menu is behind you. Tell me what you want to eat. There are only 3 jars of Ice Heart Jade Urn wine a day, and there is only one left," Bu Fang said as he pointed at the menu behind the Emperor. The Emperor was slightly taken aback. He turned his head and saw the extremely expensive menu on the wall. Interesting. A bowl of improved egg-fried rice is actually sold for 10 crystals. Sweet and sour ribs is sold for 50 crystals each. Why is it so expensive? The Emperor frowned and lightly coughed a few times. Then, he asked Bu Fang, "I naturally have my reasons for selling the dishes at such a high price. The ingredients, processing, and cooking process of our store's delicacies are all strictly up to standard. Not only is the taste excellent, but it can also promote the circulation and growth of true energy within a cultivator's body. These prices are fair," Bu Fang expressionlessly said. "Your dishes can promote cultivation. Even if it is the meat of a spirit beast, the spirit energy within it will mostly dissipate after being cooked. How are you able to cook delicacies that can promote cultivation?" the Emperor asked curiously. Bu Fang calmly glanced at the Emperor and frowned. He said, "That is a secret." Cough, cough, cough. Xiao Meng and the others immediately coughed a few times. They were a little embarrassed by Bu Fang's answer. The Emperor, on the other hand, nodded his head. "Yes, perhaps you have a unique processing method and cooking technique. This is indeed a secret and shouldn't be casually revealed. Young man, then serve me a portion of all your dishes. Let me have a good taste of your so-called delicacies that can promote the circulation of true energy." The Emperor calmly looked at Bu Fang and said while stroking his beard. "Yes, all right. Then wait a moment. I will cook your dish after I finish cooking their dishes." Bu Fang expressionlessly nodded and replied. He then turned around and walked toward the kitchen. The Emperor frowned this time. He was a little displeased and said, "Why don't you cook for me first? First come, first serve. This is the store's rule." Bu Fang stopped at the entrance of the kitchen and turned around to reply. Cough, cough. "Owner Bu, actually, it's fine if our dishes are a little slower. Please serve the dishes to your Majesty first," Xiao Meng awkwardly coughed and hurriedly said. Bu Fang expressionlessly glanced at Xiao Meng and indifferently said, "I have already said that this is the store's rule. First come, first served. Since you ordered the dishes first, I will cook your portion first." After saying that, Bu Fang went back into the kitchen and continued cooking. Xiao Meng was speechless after hearing Bu Fang's words. He could only look at Bu Fang with a helpless gaze, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. The smile on the emperor's face had already disappeared. His deep gaze looked toward the direction of the kitchen and his finger tapped on the table. He indifferently said, "He has a strong personality, but this personality must be built on the foundation of strength. I will give him a chance. If the delicacies he cooks are unable to move me, then there is no need for him to continue operating this store." The emperor was the emperor after all. He was high and mighty and had never been ignored like this before. Bu Fang's indifference had also aroused the emperor's displeasure. Xiao Meng and Ji Qingshue's hearts immediately trembled. They knew that the emperor was a little angry. Chapter 64. The store suddenly became quiet. The pressure from the emperor's contemplation caused Xiao Meng and Ji Qingxue to not even dare to breathe loudly. Emperor Chongfeng was, after all, Emperor Chongfeng. He had conquered sects from other regions for dozens of years and destroyed many once glorious sects from other regions. The pressure and killing intent from his body were incomparably condensed. However, Xiao Meng also slightly knitted his brows and softly reminded the emperor, "Your Majesty, don't forget the background of this store. The big black dog at the entrance is a supreme spirit beast. It will be a little difficult to destroy this store." The corners of the emperor's wrinkled face twitched. He glanced at Xiao Meng and calmly said, "Great General Xiao, I remember in your report that you mentioned that as long as we don't cause trouble in this store, the Supreme Being Spirit Beast won't make a move, right?" Xiao Meng was slightly startled. He did not understand why the emperor would ask this question. However, he still solemnly nodded and said, "Yes, Your Majesty." "Then it's simple. The rule of this store is that as long as no one causes trouble in the store, the Supreme Spirit Beast will not make a move. There are many ways to destroy this store, but there aren't many ways to prevent the Supreme Spirit Beast from making a move. However, it's not like there aren't any." The emperor's index finger lightly tapped on the table, emitting a deep tapping sound. Xiao Meng's pupils slightly constricted. There were other ways? Could it be that His Majesty could find an expert in the Empire who could suppress the Supreme Spirit Beast? "General Xiao, you've been on expeditions all year round, so you naturally don't understand business struggles. Even if this store is overseen by a Supreme Spirit Beast, it is still a store after all. Furthermore, it has its own rules. As long as I give the order to ban the store, how can it continue to operate?" The emperor chuckled and reminded Xiao Meng. Xiao Meng came to a sudden realization, and his expression became interesting. "That's right, according to the pride of a Supreme Spirit Beast, if no one caused trouble in the store, it would definitely not make a move. Commercial blacklisting was the simplest and most effective way to deal with it." "Haha, General Xiao, you don't have to worry too much. I was just making a casual remark. If Owner Bu's dishes could satisfy me, why would I ban him?" The emperor chuckled and stroked his long beard. Xiaoyi served the dish. Just as everyone was discussing outside, Bu Fang finished another dish and called out to Xiaoyi, "Smelly boss. If your dishes can't satisfy Grandpa Emperor, he's going to ban your restaurant," Ouyang Xiaoyi said to Bu Fang in a low voice as she carried the dishes to him. Bu Fang expressionlessly nodded and nonchalantly replied, "Oh. Smelly boss, aren't you worried?" Xiaoyi asked with a pout. She had come over to warn the smelly boss out of goodwill, but he actually had such an indifferent attitude. It was too infuriating. Bu Fang patted Xiaoyi's head and said with a smile, "Don't worry, no one's stomach can't be satisfied by this god of cooking's dishes." Ouyang Xiaoyi was stunned. She looked at Bu Fang, who was full of confidence, and her eyes were about to emit little stars. The confident smelly boss was really handsome. "Go ahead. Don't let the customers wait too long," Bu Fang said. Ouyang Xiaoyi nodded and eagerly carried the Li's fish toward Ji Qingshue's seat. "Your Highness, here's your Li's fish. Please enjoy," Ouyang Xiaoyi charmingly said as she placed the Li's fish on Ji Qingshue's seat. Ji Qingxue nodded and subconsciously glanced at the emperor. He discovered that the latter seemed to be attracted by the rich aroma of the Li's fish, which was a mixture of wine and fish. The Emperor's gaze landed on the Li's fish. His wrinkled face slightly trembled, as if he was swallowing his saliva. "Father, would you like to try it?" Ji Qingxue respectfully asked. When the Emperor heard Ji Qingxue's words, he averted his gaze and indifferently said, "No need, you can eat it yourself. I've also ordered a dish. By the way, what's the name of this dish?" "Li's fish," Ji Qingxue respectfully explained. The Emperor indifferently nodded and slightly closed his eyes, no longer paying attention to his surroundings. Ji Qingxue lightly sighed. His gaze toward the Emperor was a little gloomy. He thought, "Why does Father dislike me so much? I'm also your son and I'm at the forefront of killing enemies. Why can't you show me even a little bit of concern?" Xiao Meng also felt a little helpless. He walked back to Ji Qingxue's table and poured a cup of wine. He clinked glasses with Ji Qingxue and the two of them drank it together. As the rich aroma of the dishes continuously wafted out from the kitchen, the Emperor's tightly shut eyes trembled a little, and he finally opened them. "Father, I still have to participate in the expedition ceremony tomorrow. I'll take my leave first." Ji Qingxue had already finished his meal. He stood up and respectfully bowed to the Emperor as he spoke in a calm tone. The Emperor nodded and waved his hand, indicating that he could leave. Ji Qingxue took a deep look at the Emperor's figure. His eyes narrowed and he turned around to leave. His white robe fluttered like rolling waves. "Xiaoyi, serve the dish." Bu Fang's voice once again came from the kitchen. Ouyang Xiaoyi's eyes lit up. She knew that it was her Emperor grandfather's dish. She had waited for a long time to see the smelly boss's dish conquer her Emperor grandfather. The improved egg-fried rice was overflowing with a rich aroma. The light golden sticky egg liquid wrapped around the pearl-like rice grains seemed to be emitting a faint brilliance that mesmerized the eyes. "Emperor grandfather, here's your improved egg-fried rice." Ouyang Xiaoyi placed the egg-fried rice in front of the Emperor and looked at him with her big eyes filled with anticipation. "Good, good. Little girl, why did you come to this store to work as a waitress? Did your grandfather agree to it as well?" The Emperor kindly smiled and gently said as he rubbed Ouyang Xiaoyi's head. "Humph, if my grandfather dares to not let me come, I'll pull his beard." Ouyang Xiaoyi's eyes narrowed into a crescent shape as she giggled. The Emperor laughed heartily. His gaze fell on the egg-fried rice in front of him. His gaze changed as he looked at it. As an emperor, he had very strict requirements for food. The imperial kitchen was set up in the imperial palace, and the chefs inside were all carefully selected from tens of thousands of chefs in the Light Wind Empire. They were all elites in the culinary world. He had eaten countless dishes, and his ability to appraise delicacies was also extraordinary. The egg-fried rice in front of him, not to mention the aroma, was completely captivated by its appearance. Unlike those traditional egg-fried rice, the egg liquid of Bu Fang's egg-fried rice was only 70 to 80% cooked. It was like the liquid was poured over the rice. Using the blue and white porcelain spoon to lightly scoop up a spoonful, the egg liquid was even pulled into a long thread. Steam rose from the gap that was scooped up, and the aroma assailed the nostrils. The aroma enveloped the entire person, as if he had fallen into an ocean of fragrance. When the egg-fried rice was sent into his mouth, the 80 to 80% cooked egg liquid instantly solidified and was filled with elasticity. It bounced on the tongue and the walls of the oral cavity, bringing about a peculiar taste. Gulp! After finishing the mouthful of egg-fried rice, the Emperor could not help but scoop up another spoonful. It was a completely subconscious action. "Smells so good. Delicious." The Emperor's eyes completely lit up. It had been a long time since he had eaten such a delicacy. It was a delicacy that made all the pores on his body open up. While the Emperor was enjoying the egg-fried rice, Ouyang Xiaoyi once again brought over another dish. It was a large celadone bowl filled with a rich fragrance of fish head tofu soup. The milky white soup swayed in the bowl, and the faintly discernible jade-like tofu shone brightly. The fish was tender and emitted the aroma of fish meat. Emperor Grandpa, eating egg-fried rice and drinking fish head tofu soup is the most comfortable thing. Come, try Xiaoyi's favorite fish head tofu soup. When Ouyang Xiaoyi saw the emperor's intoxicated expression, her heart bloomed like a flower. She was extremely happy. After placing the fish head tofu soup in front of the emperor, she even personally scooped a small bowl of fish soup for him. The milky white fish soup emitted a rich fragrance, and when paired with the fragrance of the egg-fried rice, the emperor immediately felt hungry. This fish soup is good. After tasting a mouthful of the fish soup, the freshness of the fish and the fragrance of the tofu blossomed on the tip of his tongue at the same time. They pervaded and covered his taste buds, causing him to involuntarily cry out in praise. Xiao Meng, who was in the distance, let out a long sigh. As long as your majesty is happy, then it's fine. As long as your majesty is happy, then you won't think about sealing Onerbu's store. That way you won't have to face a supreme spirit beast, and everyone will be happy. Chapter 65. At the entrance of the alleyway, a group of armored imperial guards stood there with solemn expressions, blocking off the entrance of the alleyway. In front of the guards, Lien Fu, who was wearing a brocade robe and swinging his horsetail whisk, anxiously paced back and forth. Occasionally, he would stop and look at the store with a worried expression. His Majesty is too much. It's not like I will fight with him for food. Why won't he let me accompany him in? Lien Fu unhappily sighed. He released his consciousness and vigilantly observed his surroundings. His Majesty leaving the palace was no small matter. Once the experts of the sect found out, it would attract a swarm of assassins. Suddenly, a commotion broke out among the guards. The crowd parted and an elegant figure slowly walked out. His Highness, the Third Prince, is also here. What a coincidence! Lien Fu lightly smiled as he pinched his thumb and middle finger. Ji Qingshue's expression was somewhat cold. He nodded his head and continued walking forward. His long robe fluttered and left behind a cool breeze. Lien Fu helplessly looked at Ji Qingshue's back. It seemed like the Third Prince had met His Majesty in the store, and they did not get along well. As a member of the imperial family, he had to face the affairs of the imperial family. If His Majesty did not like the Third Prince, it would be useless no matter how diligent and outstanding one was. Everyone, stay alert. His Majesty is in the alleyway. If anything happens to His Majesty, you all know the consequences. Lien Fu harumphed as he warned the guards. Io, isn't this Chief Steward Lien? Long time no see. A flattering voice sounded out and interrupted Lien Fu, who was preparing to give a long lecture to the guards. Lien Fu puzzledly glanced at the newcomer. The person before him was skinny with a protruding mouth and monkey cheeks. He was wearing a gorgeous brocade robe, and a belt inlaid with green jade hung from his waist. His fingers were covered with sparkling rings, and he looked like a rich man. You are? Lien Fu puzzledly asked. He did not seem to know such a vulgar old man. Chief Steward Lien, have you forgotten about me? I am the owner of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant. Didn't His Majesty come to eat the roasted flower duck last time? I was the one who personally served that dish. The newcomer did not seem to mind that Lien Fu did not remember him at all as he squinted his eyes and smiled. Oh, you're that thing called Qian. Qian something? Lien Fu narrowed his eyes and pointed at the man with his thumb and middle finger trembling. Eunuch, my name is Qian Bao, the man reminded him. Lien Fu came to a sudden realization. He nodded and said, That's right, it's Qian Bao. Io, what is the owner of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant doing here? I was just passing by and came over to greet you when I saw you. It's been a long time since you've eaten at the Immortal Phoenix restaurant. When will you do me the honor? Your presence brings light to our humble Immortal Phoenix restaurant. Qian Bao smiled brightly. The dishes at the Immortal Phoenix restaurant were indeed pretty good and could be considered as a first-class restaurant in the Light Wind Empire. However, ever since Lien Fu ate the dishes cooked by Bufang, he felt that even the dishes from the Imperial kitchen were tasteless. Why would he go to the Immortal Phoenix restaurant to eat? Aside from Immortal Phoenix restaurant's signature dish, roasted flower duck, the other dishes were not up to par. Oh, I'll go there when I'm free. Lien Fu nodded absent-mindedly and answered perfunctorily. Ah, all right, then I'll respectfully await your arrival. The smile on Qian Bao's face never faded. No matter what Lien Fu's attitude was, he was still smiling brightly. After a long while, Qian Bao cautiously asked, "That eunuch is His Majesty in this alleyway?" Lien Fu's pupils immediately constricted as he vigilantly looked at Qian Bao. He frowned and said in a sharp voice, "What are your intentions in asking this question?" "I'm just looking forward to His Majesty's visit again." "Didn't His Majesty call the Immortal Phoenix restaurant's roasted flower duck the Light Wind Empire's #1 duck? I'm just wondering when His Majesty will come to taste the Immortal Phoenix restaurant's cooking again," Qian Bao hurriedly said while waving his hands. "If His Majesty wants to eat it, he will naturally send someone to fetch it. What's the hurry? You may leave." Lien Fu gave Qian Bao a glance and lightly snorted. Qian Bao nodded his head and left with a smile on his face. Then, he turned around and left. After taking a few steps, the smile on his face gradually faded and was quickly replaced by a gloomy expression. The black-hearted store in the alleyway. Even His Majesty has personally come here? I was wondering why all the esteemed customers had disappeared recently. It turns out that they were attracted by this small store, Qian Bao muttered with a gloomy expression. "How dare you steal my Qian Bao's business? I won't let you get away with it. It's just a small restaurant in a small alley. It must be relying on the reputation of a dish. When that reputation is ruined, I want to see how you're going to steal my business." "Grandpa Emperor, this is Li's fish, please enjoy." She placed the Li's fish in front of the Emperor. The aroma of the wine spread in all directions, causing the Emperor to take a deep breath. "Fragrant Li's fish, so fragrant." The Emperor praised and impatiently picked up the pink fish with his chopsticks. As soon as the fish entered his mouth, the taste of distiller's grains and the fragrance of the fish exploded, enveloping his taste buds and intoxicating him. "Grandpa Emperor, this is the golden shumai. Please enjoy." Another dish was served and the interior of the store was completely enveloped by the aroma. The Emperor could not stop eating and his mouth was constantly chewing. It had been a long time since he had tasted such intoxicating delicacies. Wiping away the grease on his beard, the Emperor's eyes stared at the top-grade dishes that were served one after another. His face was filled with joy. To a glutton, tasting delicious food was the happiest experience in his life. "Xiaoyi, didn't you say that there is a wine in the store that is even better than the Imperial Palace's bejeweled nectar? Why don't I see it?" The Emperor curiously asked Xiaoyi as he picked up a piece of sweet and sour ribs and stuffed it into his mouth with a face full of enjoyment. "There is. Grandpa Emperor, please wait." Ouyang Xiaoyi grinned and cheerfully ran to the kitchen window. "Smelly boss, hurry up and bring out the Ice Heart Jade Urn wine. Grandpa Emperor wants to taste it," Ouyang Xiaoyi said to Bufang. After Bufang finished cooking the last dish, he wiped off the water on his hands and nodded. He asked Ouyang Xiaoyi to serve the last dish of stir-fried vegetables while he took out the last jar of Ice Heart Jade Urn wine from the cupboard. Holding the Ice Heart Jade Urn wine, Bufang walked out of the kitchen. After placing the jar of wine in front of the Emperor, Bufang found a seat and sat down. He calmly asked the Emperor, "What do you think? Do you still want to ban the store?" The Emperor curiously picked up the green vegetables that seemed as if they had never been cooked. When he heard Bufang's question, a hint of awkwardness flashed across his face. However, this awkwardness quickly disappeared. After taking a bite of the vegetables, the warm vegetable juice immediately gushed out of his mouth, and the fragrance of the vegetables lingered in his mouth. "This is stir-fried vegetables?" The Emperor was extremely astonished after taking a bite. "As you can see, this is just a stack of stir-fried vegetables. It's just that a special cooking technique was used during the stir-frying process," Bufang calmly said. As Bufang spoke, he removed the clay seal on the jar of wine and poured a cup of wine for the Emperor. He pointed his finger at the cup, indicating that the Emperor could taste it. The Emperor's eyes immediately lit up. The fragrance of the Ice Heart Jade Urn wine had already lured out the liquor worm in his body. He was craving for it. He picked up the blue and white porcelain cup and took a small sip. The spicy taste flowed into his tongue along his lips and suddenly blossomed, causing the Emperor's entire body to tremble and the wrinkles on his face to jump. After drinking the wine in the cup in one gulp, the Emperor smacked his lips and lightly exhaled. His face was filled with intoxication. The rumors are indeed true. The Ice Heart Jade Urn wine is indeed more delicious than my bejeweled nectar wine. I have lived for so many years, yet I only manage to drink this kind of fine wine when I am halfway into the grave. Is this a punishment or a reward from the heavens? The Emperor squinted his eyes and sighed, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. With this kind of fine wine and this kind of delicacy, if I still shut down Ownerbu's shop, then I would really be an old fool. The Emperor lightly stroked his beard and indicated for Bufang to refill his wine. After drinking another cup, he laughed incessantly. Bufang expressionlessly looked at the laughing Emperor as if everything was within his expectations. Just as he was confident, there was no one's stomach that could not be conquered by his dishes. The Emperor drank 3 cups of wine in a row. The alcohol was surging, but his eyes were even brighter. The Emperor stared at Bufang and slammed the cup on the table with a bang. With a burning gaze he said, "Ownerbu, follow me. Come to my imperial kitchen. Your monthly salary is 10,000 crystals." Chapter 66. If you work for me, your monthly salary will be 10,000 crystals. The Emperor looked at Bufang with a burning gaze. He extended a finger and shook it as he spoke with a smile. Bufang looked at the Emperor expressionlessly. He paid no attention to the Emperor's shaking finger. His eyes were slightly blank as he thought, How much did the Emperor say I would be paid? 10,000 crystals? Host, as the god of cooking who wishes to stand at the top of the food chain in the fantasy world, your pure goal should not be tainted by external factors. You must be firm in your heart. Neither wealth nor poverty can be swayed. Use your own hands to create a beautiful future. The system solemnly and seriously poured a bowl of chicken soup for Bufang, whose heart was already wavering. The corners of his mouth twitched and the beautiful fantasy in his heart was shattered. Bufang looked at the Emperor coldly without looking sideways. He calmly said, "Why should I work for you?" The confident smile on the Emperor's face immediately froze. He frowned and said, "Because I am the Emperor. I am the Emperor. Do you think I am not qualified to hire you as my imperial chef? How many chefs in the world fight to enter the imperial kitchen and obtain the opportunity to cook for me? Is the Emperor that awesome? Whoever wants to go can go," Bufang calmly said with a calm gaze. He was neither arrogant nor overbearing. It was as if he was stating an ordinary matter. The Emperor was immediately stunned. Xiaomeng, who had been watching the two from afar, was also slightly startled. The Emperor came back to his senses. The corners of his mouth twitched. In the whole world, perhaps only Bufang dared to speak to him like this. However, he really could not do anything to Bufang within the store. "Don't waste your energy. I will not be recruited by anyone. If you want to eat, come to the store. As for the so-called imperial kitchen, I have no interest in it at all," Bufang calmly said. He stood up and spoke calmly as if he was drinking water. The emperor gave Bufang a deep look and nodded. He did not ask any more questions. Some things only needed to be asked to know the answer. What an ambitious chef! The emperor sighed in his heart and did not say anything else. He narrowed his eyes and enjoyed the comfortable beauty brought about by the ice-heart jade urn wine. After eating for a while, the emperor finally finished his meal. He wiped his beard, and the wrinkles on his face seemed to come alive. Very good, very delicious. It's been a long time since I've eaten such a delicious dish. I should reward it. The emperor stroked his beard and said, As for what to reward, it's a little hard to decide. Bufang was stunned on the spot. He didn't expect the emperor to do something like this. The emperor stood with his hands clasped behind his back. After sweeping his gaze across the clean and tidy store, a mysterious smile suddenly appeared on his face. Owner Bu, I have already thought of a reward for you. Ordinary crystals are too common, and you won't be able to use some expensive elixirs. I see that your store doesn't have a signboard, so why don't I give it a name? The emperor looked at Bufang benevolently. From his point of view, Bufang would definitely not reject this reward. With the emperor personally writing a name, the store's reputation would be completely opened and it would be completely popular in the Light Wind Empire. Therefore, this reward was more practical than crystals for a restaurant. Host, the interior decorations of the store are all done by the system. The system has already started preparing the signboard, so the host is not allowed to accept other people's signboard nominations. The system solemnly and seriously informed Bufang of a cruel reality. Bufang knew that with the system's arrogant nature, there was no way it would allow him to receive such a generous reward. Thank you for your kindness. If you like the store's dishes, you can come visit often. As for the nomination, there's no need for it. The store's renovation is very good, so there's no need to change it, Bufang expressionlessly said. He ignored his conscience and once again rejected the emperor's kind intentions. The emperor really felt very embarrassed. His attempt to recruit Bufang was mercilessly rejected, and his offer to help the store propose a signboard was directly rejected. This black-hearted store was indeed extremely arrogant, but at least they had the capital to be arrogant. Good, very good. In that case, I thank Owner Bu for your hospitality. The emperor simply nodded his head. It was impossible to tell whether he was happy or angry. After putting down some crystals, he left the store under the escort of Xiao Meng. Due to the emperor, many of the regular customers of the store were not able to enter. Shusher originally planned to have a serving of spicy boiled fish today, but he didn't expect to find that the alleyway was blocked so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. This kind of extravagance gave him a fright. Only after understanding the situation did he understand the whole story. Oh my God, even His Majesty personally visited Owner Bu's store. I must inform the Crown Prince of this as soon as possible. Shusher was startled. He did not care about eating and immediately turned around to leave. At the same time, the news of the emperor's arrival at the alleyway restaurant was also spread throughout the entire imperial city. The emperor was very famous, and the so-called celebrity effect was nothing more than that. This time, Fong Fong's little store was really on fire. Borrowing the emperor's name, the store became completely famous within the imperial city. Almost all of the upper echelons of society learned of this news. What did you say? Father really personally went to the store? In the majestic palace on the left side of the Gate of Heavenly Mystery, Shusher truthfully reported the news to the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince's pupils slightly constricted, and he abruptly stood up. Yes, Your Highness. Chief Eunuch Lien and the others completely sealed off the entrance of the alleyway. Shusher said. The Crown Prince had one hand behind his back as he paced around for a few steps. Then he raised his head and asked, Shusher, is there any news about the Blood Phoenix chicken that I asked you to look for? Your Highness, there is news. It will arrive at the Imperial City in a few days, Shusher bowed and said. The Crown Prince, Ji Chengan, nodded with an extremely serious expression. I wonder if Imperial Father will be able to obtain any information regarding the Sage Herb Phoenix chicken soup after entering the store this time. Once Imperial Father finds out about this, then I must immediately present the Blood Phoenix chicken. If Imperial Father doesn't know about this, then I will bring my own ingredients and ask Honorbu to cook a portion of Sage Herb Phoenix chicken soup for me as a sign of filial piety. The Crown Prince rubbed his fingers and the corner of his mouth slightly curled up. King Yu's manor, the center of the garden. King Yu, Ji Qingyu, was wearing casual clothes with his hair draped over his shoulders. He was holding on to a handful of crystal fragments as he strolled around the pond in the center of the garden. From time to time, he would grind some crystal fragments and throw them into the pond. Once the crystal fragments entered the pond, ripples appeared on the surface of the pond. Fishes of different colors were fighting over the rare crystal fragment. A red fish that didn't manage to snatch the crystal fragment immediately angrily swayed its body in the pond. Then, the fish instantly opened its mouth so wide that it almost turned into a copper gong with sharp teeth. It swallowed the fish that managed to snatch the crystal fragment. A faint smell of blood began to spread within the pond. King Yu's face was filled with a smile. However, his gaze was somewhat cold as he stared at the fish that was eating the fish. Even fishes know how to compete. As members of the imperial family, how can they be merciful? Every time they snatch, it will be accompanied by blood. As King Yu softly muttered, the sound of footsteps suddenly came from behind him. Several figures appeared behind him. These figures were all wrapped in black robes with faint true energy lingering around their bodies. You guys are finally here. The corner of King Yu's mouth curled up. He scattered all of the crystal fragments in his hand into the pond and slowly turned around. The figures wrapped in black robes raised their hands and took off the hood of the black robe, revealing a face that was as thin as a match. His eye sockets were deeply sunken, and there seemed to be a spirit fire pulsating within his eyes. Soul Sect's Great Elder, Hun Qianyun, greets King Yu. Chapter 67. The weather was getting colder and colder. It was as if the late autumn had turned into winter in an instant. The pedestrians on the streets of the imperial city began to wrap themselves in thick cotton-padded clothes. When they exhaled on the streets early in the morning, they could clearly see white vapor. Bang bang bang! A series of knocking sounds came from the door. Bufang, who had just woken up and was practicing his meteor cutting technique in the kitchen, was slightly startled. Who would be knocking on the door so early in the morning? Bufang put down the kitchen knife in his hand and unhurriedly opened the door. Ouyang Xiaoi, who was wrapped in a pink cotton-padded jacket, came into view. The latter's watery eyes were wide open, blinking as she looked at Bufang, who had just opened the door. Xiaoi? Why are you here so early today? Bufang asked in puzzlement. Usually, shouldn't this little girl wait until Fatty Jean and the others were almost done eating before coming over? The little girl was slightly out of breath, as if she had jogged all the way here. Her tender little face was still slightly flushed, and the tip of her nose was slightly red from the cold air, adding a tinge of loveliness to her appearance. Smelly boss, today is the day that His Highness Big Brother is leaving the Imperial City to go to war. Let's send him off, Ouyang Xiaoi said with anticipation. Bufang was stunned. He seemed to remember that Ji Qingxue said yesterday that he would leave the Imperial City today to go to war with the sects outside the city. After thinking about how Ji Qingxue had been taking care of his business for the past few days, Bufang did not reject Ouyang Xiaoi and nodded instead. Wait for me, Bufang said calmly. Then, he turned around and went back into the store. After a while, he came out with a wooden board. On the board was written, "Closed for today." After hanging the wooden board on the door of the store, Bufang squatted down and stroked Black's smooth and clean fur. He then closed the store and left with Ouyang Xiaoi. Bufang was wearing a cashmere robe that was tightly wrapped around his body. A dark gray scarf was wrapped around his neck so that the cold wind could not enter his back through the gaps of his neck. Ouyang Xiaoyi didn't expect Bufang to agree to send her off so readily. She originally just wanted to give it a try when she asked Bufang. She was already prepared to be rejected. However, the results were often somewhat unexpected. The two of them walked to the entrance of the alleyway and saw the two good-looking siblings, Xiao Xiaolong and Xiao Yanyu, standing not too far away. Xiao Yanyu's face was covered by a veil and her peerless appearance could not be clearly seen. Her temperament was simple and elegant, as if she was a fairy that had descended to the mortal world. Her injuries were almost healed, and she could basically go out without any hindrance. When Xiao Xiaolong saw Bufang and Ouyang Xiaoyi, he waved his arms from afar. Standing in the cold winter, the two siblings were both wearing white fur coats, fully revealing their noble temperament. Coupled with their nature-defying appearance, they were indeed a beautiful scene on the street. "Owner Bu, you actually agreed to come with us to send His Highness off?" Xiao Xiaolong widened his eyes in surprise as he looked at Bufang, his face filled with disbelief. Previously, when Ouyang Xiaoyi said that she wanted to ask Bufang, he thought that with Bufang's cold and aloof personality, he would definitely not agree. However, reality ruthlessly slapped him in the face. "Why? Is it strange?" Bufang expressionlessly looked at Xiao Xiaolong and said. Xiao Xiaolong immediately smiled awkwardly and did not say anything else. Beside him, Xiao Yanyu's pair of charming eyes fell on Bufang. After a long while, she slightly bowed and gently said, "Thank you, Owner Bu, for saving my life." Bufang nodded his head and the four of them immediately became silent. Then, they left the alleyway and walked toward the main street of the imperial city. The morning wind was slightly bone-chilling. Bufang tightened the scarf around his neck and curiously looked around. He rarely left the store and his impression of the imperial city was still very vague. Even though he had stayed in the imperial city for almost 2 months, Bufang was still not the slightest bit familiar with the streets of the imperial city. As the sky gradually brightened, hawkers continuously appeared on both sides of the street. They exhaled white gas and curled their bodies as they continuously called out to sell their wares in the cold wind. The shop assistants on both sides of the street were also opening their doors with sleepy eyes and yawns. The imperial city, which had slept for an entire night, was gradually waking up under the morning light. Bufang did not conceal his curiosity. Ouyang Xiaoyi cheerfully introduced the surrounding objects and buildings to Bufang. "Is that the Immortal Phoenix restaurant? Known as the #1 restaurant in the imperial city?" Bufang suddenly pointed at a gorgeous 3-story building in the distance and said. Ouyang Xiaoyi and the other two were slightly stunned and then nodded their heads. Ouyang Xiaoyi pointed at the 3 flamboyant words on the entrance of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant and charmingly said, "Smelly boss." Those 3 words were suggested by Grandpa the Emperor himself. Bufang looked over and saw that the 3 words were indeed full of meaning. The Emperor's calligraphy was pretty good. Unfortunately, if it was not for the system's rejection, he might have agreed to the Emperor's request back then. That was because he had long wanted to get a signboard for the store. Abrupt mission. Host, please taste the 13 dishes of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant today and evaluate the quality of each dish. Find the 3 flaws in each dish. A successful person needs to learn from the strong and make up for the weak. Young man, use your picky tongue to find fault with the Immortal Phoenix restaurant. Mission reward: 10% true energy cultivation progress and an advanced cooking method for any dish of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant. Just as Bufang was sizing up the Immortal Phoenix restaurant, the system's solemn and earnest voice resounded in Bufang's mind, causing Bufang to be dumbfounded. Another abrupt mission? Was he going to use his tongue to find fault this time? Fine. This mission was indeed very systematic. However, the principle of learning from the strong and making up for the weak was not wrong. Even though Bufang had the system, it was indeed not good for Bufang, who wanted to grow into the god of cooking who stood at the top of the food chain in the fantasy world. Furthermore, the abrupt mission reward this time was very tempting to Bufang. 10% true energy cultivation progress and a new cooking method for a dish. If his true energy cultivation progress was increased by another 10%, he would soon be able to break through to 4th grade battle spirit. At that time, the system would be upgraded and more functions would be unlocked. Smelly boss, what are you daydreaming about? Let's hurry up or else we won't be able to send off Big Brother His Highness, Ouyang Xiaoyi said as she tugged at Bufang's cashmere robe. Bufang returned to his senses and nodded his head. He once again took a deep look at the Immortal Phoenix restaurant and then followed Ouyang Xiaoyi and the others as they walked along the broad main street of the Imperial City. Soon, the 4 of them arrived at the city gate. On both sides of the city gate stood rows of soldiers wearing metal armor. Their expressions were solemn and their bodies were emitting an extremely somber aura. Their faces were expressionless. Outside the city gate, there were even more military formations lined up. These soldiers were the 3rd Prince's soldiers, and they were there to protect him when he went on an expedition against the sects outside the city. Today, Ji Qingxue was not wearing his usual scholarly white robe. Instead, he was dressed in military attire. He wore metal armor and a metal helmet on his head. His handsome face was no longer as gentle as usual. Instead, it was filled with a cold and somber aura. Thank you, Owner Bu, for sending me off. I am overwhelmed by your favor. When Ji Qingxue saw that Bufang had actually appeared to send him off, he was slightly surprised and felt a little warm in his heart. Your Highness, during this expedition, you must take care of your body. Your health is more important than anything else. Remember, you are still a prince. Xiao Meng solemnly warned. The expedition against the sects outside the city was not a joke. It was extremely dangerous, and the slightest carelessness could lead to the annihilation of the entire army. After all, the sects outside the city were all experts who cultivated true energy. Even though the Empire's army was powerful, a mighty dragon could not suppress a snake in its den. Emperor Chongfeng had been fighting against the sects outside the city for so many years, and yet, he was still unable to completely exterminate them. Ji Qingxue nodded his head. He turned around and sat on a blood-brown single-horned horse. He pulled the reins and gazed into the distance in the direction of the majestic imperial palace. There was no joy or sorrow in his eyes. The orderly army slowly moved away from the imperial capital, slowly disappearing into the horizon. When Ji Qingxue's figure disappeared, Ouyang Xiaoyi withdrew her gaze and said to Bufang, "Smelly boss, all right. We have sent His Highness off. Next, are we going back to the store to open for business?" Xiao Yinyu and Xiao Xiaolong also looked over at the same time. If Bufang was going back to open for business, they would follow him. It was also a kind of happiness to be able to eat Bufang's dishes every day. However, Bufang expressionlessly shook his head. He turned his head to look in the direction of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant, and the corners of his mouth stiffly curled up. Let's go eat at the Immortal Phoenix restaurant today, and try out the delicacies of the #1 restaurant in the Imperial City. Chapter 68. Owner Bu, are you going to the Immortal Phoenix restaurant to eat? Xiao Xiaolong's eyes widened when he heard Bufang's words. His expression became a little strange. Xiao Yinyu and Ouyang Xiaoyi were also very puzzled. In their opinion, Bufang's culinary skills completely crushed the chefs of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant. Why would he want to eat at the Immortal Phoenix restaurant? As the #1 restaurant in the Imperial City, the Immortal Phoenix restaurant naturally has its own merits. Moreover, this chef also needs to learn. Only by accepting all rivers into the sea can there be a big restaurant, Bufang said indifferently. He turned around and walked toward the direction of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant. Only by accepting all rivers into the sea can there be a big restaurant. The corner of Xiao Xiaolong's mouth twitched. He suddenly felt that there was something wrong with Owner Bu today. Xiaoyi, don't you think that Owner Bu is very strange today? I feel that Owner Bu's purpose for going to the Immortal Phoenix restaurant is not pure. Xiao Xiaolong moved closer to Ouyang Xiaoyi and whispered with narrowed eyes. Ouyang Xiaoyi was a little confused and asked curiously, strange? No, what's strange about it? The more you learn, the more you can improve. These words are very reasonable. Grandpa often says the same thing to Xiaoyi. Xiao Xiaolong pursed his lips and thought, all right, I'll pretend I didn't say anything. The three of them quickly followed Bu Fang's footsteps and walked toward the Immortal Phoenix restaurant. Xiao Xiaolong and the others were naturally familiar with the Immortal Phoenix restaurant. Before Bu Fang's store appeared, the place they went to the most was the Immortal Phoenix restaurant. After all, it was the #1 restaurant in the Imperial City. The taste of its dishes was worthy of recognition. Of course, that was under the condition that their dishes were not comparable to Bu Fang's. Owner Bu, since you're going to the Immortal Phoenix restaurant, do you understand its rules? Xiao Xiaolong took a few steps and walked side by side with Bu Fang. Rules? What rules? Bu Fang turned his head and looked at Xiao Xiaolong with a puzzled expression. The corner of Xiao Xiaolong's mouth twitched. He knew that Owner Bu must have decided to go to the Immortal Phoenix restaurant on a whim. However, even though he was speechless, he still gave Bu Fang some knowledge. As the #1 restaurant in the Imperial City of the Light Wind Empire, the Immortal Phoenix restaurant has a total of 3 floors. The decorations and quality of service on each floor are different. The first floor is the general area. The dishes on the first floor are not expensive. Those with slightly better family can go there a few times a month. The second floor is the VIP area. The Immortal Phoenix restaurant has put in a lot of effort to decorate it. The waiters on the first floor have also been replaced by pretty maids wearing embroidered robes. In terms of service quality, it is already superior to the entire Imperial City and even the entire Empire. Furthermore, the dishes on the second floor are much more expensive than the first floor, and the taste is also much better. The third floor is the sovereign area. All of the services here are of the highest quality. Whether it's the decorations or the service staff, they are undoubtedly the best in the Light Wind Empire. Furthermore, only those with high status can enter. Xiao Xiaolong explained to Bu Fang. He introduced the different marketing methods of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant's third floor. After Bu Fang heard this, he narrowed his eyes and nodded. The owner of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant still had some brains. The different levels of marketing could make people feel the difference in status and promote consumption. The customers in the general area would go to the VIP area because of their reputation, and the customers in the VIP area would return to the general area because they had already been to the VIP area once. This way, the sales in the VIP area would increase, and they would naturally make a lot of money. The food in the sovereign area on the third floor should be the best, right? Are you qualified to enter? Bu Fang thought for a while and suddenly asked. Since it's the sovereign area, only people of noble status in the Light Wind Empire can enter. Children of officials like us don't have the qualifications to enter. Back then, Sun Qixiang wanted to force his way in, but he was beaten out by a 6th-grade battle emperor, Xiao Xiaolong said. Bu Fang furrowed his eyebrows. Even you guys don't have the qualifications to enter the sovereign area? Only the emperor, the minister of the left, my father, General Ouyang, and other high-ranking officials can enter the sovereign area, Xiao Xiaolong said. In addition, he also vaguely mentioned the background of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant. While the two of them were talking, they arrived in front of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant's extremely lavishly decorated entrance. Oh my, isn't this young Master Xiao? I haven't seen you in a while. Are you here for a meal today? Quick, come in. Just as the 4 of them arrived at the entrance, A middle-aged woman with a fiery figure and a pretty face swayed her waist as she walked in. Her charming voice was filled with joy. Xiao Xiaolong elegantly smiled and lightly nodded. Elder Sister Chun, long time no see. Your figure has become even more fiery. The middle-aged woman called Elder Sister Chun immediately covered her mouth and laughed. The fiery figure in front of her chest was bouncing up and down. Even in today's temperature, her snow-white chest was still exposed. She did not seem to be bothered by the cold in the slightest. The middle-aged woman smiled and guided the crowd into the Immortal Phoenix restaurant. Bufang did not say anything. His gaze swept across Elder Sister Chun's body before he indifferently withdrew it. With a solemn expression, he stepped into the Immortal Phoenix restaurant. The moment he entered, he could feel the Immortal Phoenix restaurant's fiery popularity. The hall on the first floor was very spacious, and there were many tables arranged inside. Every table was occupied by people who were eating heartily. From the expressions on their faces, it was obvious that they were eating to their heart's content. Young Master Xiao, it's 4 people this time, right? Shall we go to the VIP area? Elder Sister Chun swayed her waist as she led the way in front while casually chatting with the customers. Yes, there's a total of 4 people. Elder Sister Chun, please arrange a seat. Xiao Xiaolong nodded his head. Just as he was about to reply, Bufang suddenly opened his mouth and interrupted him. Wait, let's eat in the general area first. Please arrange a seat. We're eating in the general area? This time, not only Xiao Xiaolong, even Xiao Yinyu and Ouyang Xiaoyi were extremely astonished. Yes, of course. If you guys want to go to the VIP area first, that's fine too. After I finish eating in the general area, I'll go to the VIP area as well, Bufang added. This time, the gazes of Xiao Xiaolong and the rest became much more playful. The red lips under Xiao Yinyu's veil even slightly curled up. This Bufang was trying to stir up trouble. All right, Elder Sister Chun, please arrange a seat for us in the general area first, Xiao Xiaolong said to Elder Sister Chun with a grin. Elder Sister Chun's pretty face was filled with doubt. Her red phoenix eyes fell on Bufang's body. After sweeping a glance at him, she withdrew her gaze and charmingly said, All right, everyone, please follow me. Under Elder Sister Chun's arrangement, everyone quickly sat on an empty seat. Bufang sat upright, took off the scarf around his neck, and opened up his cashmere coat. With a solemn expression, he reached out his hand and wiped it on the table. An oily feeling instantly emerged, and his fingers were even stained with jet-black grease. Poor hygiene affects appetite, Bufang coldly commented. Xiao Xiaolong, who had just sat down and was about to order, suddenly froze and blankly stared at Bufang. Ouyang Xiaoyi and Xiao Yinyu also blinked their charming eyes and looked strangely at Bufang. Elder Sister Chun, who had a voluptuous figure, was extremely embarrassed. However, she was discontentedly cursing in her heart. This is the general area, of course the hygiene is bad. Why are you still being picky in the general area? Give us all the dishes in the general area that you think are top-notch. Bufang sat down and expressionlessly said to Elder Sister Chun. All the top-notch dishes? There are 10 top-notch dishes in the general area, and each dish is worth 500 silver coins. Are you sure you want to serve all of them? Elder Sister Chun suspiciously looked at Bufang. It was not that she did not believe in Bufang. After all, Bufang came together with Xiao Xiaolong. Xiao Xiaolong was the son of the general's mansion, so he would naturally not be lacking in gold coins. If the young man in front of her was Xiao Xiaolong's friend, he would naturally not be lacking in money either. However, if he was not lacking in money, why did he come to the general area to show off? Elder Sister Chun, just serve the dishes. He might be lacking in anything but money, Xiao Xiaolong said to Elder Sister Chun with a chuckle. Since Xiao Xiaolong had already said so, Elder Sister Chun immediately arranged for someone to prepare the dishes. Once elder sister Chun left, Xiao Xiaolong winked at Bu Fong and said, "Owner Bu, are you planning to try all of the good dishes in the Immortal Phoenix restaurant?" The corners of Bu Fong's mouth twitched. He indifferently glanced at him and solemnly said, "That's right, I'm here to nitpick today." Chapter 69. Looking for trouble, and still saying it in such a dignified manner. This is indeed in line with Owner Bu's personality. Xiao Xiaolong and the others were speechless. They clearly did not understand why Bu Fong would come to the Immortal Phoenix restaurant to look for trouble. "Owner Bu, do you have a grudge against the Immortal Phoenix restaurant?" Xiao Yinyu's pleasant voice rang out as she softly asked. It was obvious that not only Xiao Xiaolong, even someone as intelligent as herself was puzzled. Bu Fong glanced at Xiao Yinyu and met the latter's eyes that were as clear as a spring. "Do I need a reason to look for trouble? If I want to look for trouble, I'll look for it." "All right." This answer was impeccable and very much like Owner Bu's. The crowd stopped talking and quietly waited for the dishes to be served. The general area was extremely noisy, and the air was filled with all kinds of smells. There was the smell of low-quality wine and the strange fragrance of food and dishes. All of these smells were mixed together, and it was as if a bottle of 5 flavors had been knocked over. There was an obvious look of disdain in Xiao Xiaolong's eyes. Even though the Immortal Phoenix restaurant was famous throughout the Imperial City, the hygiene in the general area was indeed not good. The main reason was that once there were too many people, it would be difficult to maintain the hygiene. "The dishes are served." A call rang out. A waiter with a white towel draped over his shoulders slowly walked over while carrying a dish. "Customer, your dish, red braised lion's head." A smile hung on the waiter's face as he placed a plate of steaming red braised lion's head on Bu Fong's table. The red braised lion's head that was drizzled with red sauce had a gorgeous luster and was emitting a meaty fragrance. Faint steam rose from the dish and rolled around in front of the crowd before dispersing. "This red braised lion's head looks pretty good," Xiao Xiaolong said with a smile as he slightly nodded his head after glancing at the dish. He picked up his chopsticks and lightly tapped the table before picking up a lion's head that was wrapped in red sauce. Expressionless, Bu Fong picked up his chopsticks and picked up a lion's head into his bowl. He first used his chopsticks to poke the lion's head to feel its hardness, then brought his nose close to it and sniffed it. Ouyang Xiaoyi and Xiao Yinyu also took a bite of the red braised lion's head. After all, it was one of the 10 signature dishes of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant. The taste was indeed pretty good. Although it was not as delicious as the dishes cooked in Bu Fong's restaurant, it was still pretty good when compared to ordinary dishes. Ouyang Xiaoyi finished her food in a few bites. Her face was flushed with satisfaction. Xiao Xiaolong smacked his lips and drank a mouthful of water. Then, he picked up another meatball and ate it. There were only 5 meatballs in a plate of red braised meatballs, and he ate 2 by himself. "Owner Bu, you should eat as well. The taste of this lion's head is pretty good. The chefs of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant are quite skilled," Xiao Xiaolong said to Bu Fong while chewing on the lion's head. Bu Fong did not reply. He took a small bite and the sauce tasted slightly astringent. After chewing a few times, Bu Fong swallowed it and put down his chopstick. He expressionlessly stopped tasting the dish. Bu Fong's actions caused Xiao Yinyu and the others to look at him with a strange expression. The sauce of this red braised meatball is too salty and astringent. It's obvious that too much salt was added. Moreover, the sugar in the sauce has not melted yet, so it tastes slightly astringent. As for the lion's head, the so-called lion's head is a meatball that is precisely kneaded together with 70% lean meat and 30% fat meat. It's also known as the 4 happiness meatball. Furthermore, the lean meat has to be chopped by yourself and the fat meat can't be too greasy. The lean meat in this dish was obviously not chopped finely and there are still shreds of meat mixed together. The fat meat is also too greasy and will affect the taste. I give you a bad review, Bufang lightly said as he lightly exhaled a breath of air. Under the dumbfounded gazes of Xiao Xiaolong and the others, Bufang said a lot of words and criticized the red braised meatball to the point that it was not good at all. Clack! Xiao Xiaolong smacked his lips and dropped his chopsticks on the table. After hearing Bufang's review, he looked at the lion's head again and felt that it was not as delicious as before. It turned out that there were so many flaws in this meatball. Originally, he still had some appetite. However, after hearing Bufang's review, he lost all interest in eating and placed the lion's head back into the bowl. Owner Bu was really here to cause trouble. Even the signature dish of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant's public area was criticized so miserably. However, with Owner Bu's culinary skills, his review should be very pertinent. The second dish was served. It was a plate of steamed fish. The fresh fragrance of the fish was constantly emitting from the fish's body, and the warm steam filled the air. The appearance of the steamed fish was well preserved. There were a few scratches on the fish's body. As the fish meat was steamed, the scratches were pushed open, revealing the tender fish meat inside. A faint fish broth flowed on the plate and enveloped the steamed fish. This time, Xiao Xiaolong and the others did not pick up their chopstick. They were all looking at Bufang and waiting for him to start his review. Bufang nodded his head and picked up his chopstick. He first used the chopsticks to touch the fish meat at the neck area of the fish. A slight springiness came from the chopsticks and caused Bufang to nod his head. It seemed like the control of the heat of the steamed fish was quite good. He used the tip of his chopsticks to touch the fish broth and placed it into his mouth. The fish broth contained a very faint salty taste. However, this slight salty taste caused Bufang's expression to instantly turn ugly. Bah! Bufang lightly spat outside the table. Then, he picked up a glass of water and drank a mouthful to dilute the salty taste in his mouth. You didn't even remove the basic salty taste of the fish. There's no need to taste it. The fish meat definitely contains a fishy taste. This fishy taste is the biggest taboo when it comes to steamed fish, and it is also the biggest failure. Bufang's expression was extremely ugly. Therefore, his tone was somewhat cold as he gave his evaluation. Xiao Xiaolong and the others were once again stunned. Bufang had already judged the steamed fish to be a failure before he even tasted the fish meat. This was too unbelievable. Xiao Xiaolong, who did not believe it, used his chopsticks to pick up a piece of fish meat and put it into his mouth. The taste was actually not bad. The salty taste that Bufang mentioned was actually not very strong. Even though it was still there, it was barely bearable. Cooking is all about rigor. Any mistake will affect the taste of the food. The salty taste should not exist in the first place. Since it exists, it is a failure, Bufang mercilessly criticized. Xiao Xiaolong and the others nodded their heads in a half-understanding manner. Next, the waiter brought up a few more dishes. However, when he saw that most of the dishes on the table were still in good condition, he was a little stunned. Some dishes were practically untouched while others were only touched 2 or 3 times. However, overall, the customers on the table only tasted a single bite of these dishes. This was practically an inconceivable thing in the Immortal Phoenix restaurant. The dishes of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant's chefs had conquered the stomachs of countless people. When the waiter brought up the dishes again, he told Elder Sister Chun about the strange situation on the table. Elder Sister Chun was also startled for a moment. Then, with a face full of suspicion, she carried the last dish to Bufang's table. "Io, young Master Xiao, why aren't you guys eating? Is it not to your liking?" Elder Sister Chun's eyes slightly narrowed as she arrived in front of the table. When she saw the table full of almost untouched dishes, she opened her mouth and asked. Bufang was currently in a very bad mood. Not being able to taste good dishes would naturally affect his mood. Xiao Xiaolong and the others somewhat helplessly pointed at Bufang and said to Elder Sister Chun, This young Master Bu said that your dishes are all too inferior and completely inedible. What? Young Master Xiao must be joking. Who in the Imperial City doesn't know the taste of our Immortal Phoenix restaurant's dishes? Even though this is the general area, even the dishes in the general area are not the slightest bit inferior to the signature dishes of the other big restaurants. Elder Sister Chun chuckled and waved her hand. Her gaze fell on Bu Fang's body with an unpleasant expression on her face. Bu Fang ignored her. He picked up his chopsticks and picked up the last dish. After taking a bite, Bu Fang put down his chopsticks, shook his head and indifferently opened his mouth. For this dish of stir-fried bamboo shoots with shrimp, the bamboo shoots chosen are too old, some of the bamboo shoots are too bitter and can't be chewed on. The quality of the shrimp used is also a mix of good and bad. Some of them are alive while others are dead. The difference in taste is too strong. I give this dish a bad rating. After Elder Sister Chun heard Bu Fang's evaluation, she was completely dumbfounded. Then, she was so angry that her chest continuously heaved up and down. This zombie-faced man was indeed here to pick a fight. The signature dish of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant's general area was actually evaluated as useless. What right did he have to give such an evaluation? Elder Sister Chun rubbed her voluptuous chest and coldly glanced at Bu Fang as she said, "From your appearance, you should also be a chef, right? Since you are a chef, you should know, what right do you have to evaluate the Immortal Phoenix restaurant's dishes?" Chapter 70. Elder Sister Chun was enraged. Xiao Xiaolong's friend was clearly here to nitpick. Even though the dishes in the general area were not cooked by the top chef of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant, it was impossible for them to be as bad as this person said. Xiao Xiaolong and the rest looked at Elder Sister Chun with a strange expression. Bu Fang was not qualified to evaluate the Immortal Phoenix restaurant's dishes? That was the biggest joke in the world. Even the Emperor was conquered by Bu Fang's dishes. What right did the Immortal Phoenix restaurant have to be so arrogant? Elder Sister Chun's words were very arrogant, but she had the right to be arrogant because she was very confident in the skills of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant's chefs. There was basically no restaurant in the Light Wind Empire that could compare to the Immortal Phoenix restaurant. The chefs they hired were the best in the entire empire. Xiao Xiaolong and the rest's ridiculing gazes made Elder Sister Chun slightly uncomfortable. Her pretty face slightly scrunched up as she said, "Am I wrong?" Xiao Xiaolong and the rest chuckled and slightly shook their heads without saying a word. Bu Fang was also expressionless as he glanced at Elder Sister Chun. That glance was as if he was looking at a clown. Bu Fang stood up and glanced at Elder Sister Chun. He took out some gold coins and placed them on the table as he lightly said, "Bring me to the second floor. The dishes on the first floor are all bad." "You!" Elder Sister Chun was furious. How could this person be so arrogant? Who did he think he was? What right did he have to criticize the dishes cooked by the Immortal Phoenix restaurant chefs? When Xiao Xiaolong and the rest saw that Bu Fang was going to the second floor, their eyes immediately lit up and they all stood up. Xiao Xiaolong smiled as he moved closer to Elder Sister Chun and softly said, "Elder Sister Chun, don't be angry. My friend's personality is just like that. Bring us to the second floor. The dishes on the second floor cannot be compared to those on the first floor. When the time comes, my friend might not give such an evaluation." "Okay. I want to see if this arrogant brat will still be so arrogant when he reaches the second floor." Elder Sister Chun tenderly snorted as she turned around and led the way while twisting her waist. Xiao Xiaolong and the others let out a carefree smile and followed after him. The second floor of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant was much narrower than the first floor. When Bu Fang and the rest stepped onto the second floor from the staircase, they could feel the different atmosphere on the second floor. Different from the noise on the first floor, the second floor was very quiet and harmonious. The decoration was very gorgeous and exquisite. There were many spirit herbs on the second floor that released fresh air. Some diners were sitting on the seats and eating the dishes gently. Elder Sister Chun swayed her body and walked at the front. She brought Bufang and the others to an empty table. She didn't have a good expression towards Bufang. She coldly said to Bufang, "Look at the menu, what do you want to eat?" Bufang took the menu. There were about 20 dishes written on it, and the price of each dish was very expensive. Although it was much lower than Fong Fong's little store, it was already an unattainable price for ordinary people. Bufang merely glanced at them before he placed the menu on the table and said indifferently, "Bring out the dishes that you think are the best on the second floor." Elder Sister Chun's pupils constricted as she coldly looked at Bufang. Judging from his tone, this brat was still looking for trouble? He dared to look for trouble on the second floor of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant? Very well. Today, I'll let you experience the dishes of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant. Elder Sister Chun angrily snorted. She turned around and left to arrange for someone to prepare the dishes. After Elder Sister Chun left, Xiao Xiaolong asked Bufang in a low voice, "Owner Bu, are you really going to criticize all of the dishes of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant today? Won't this have a bad influence? After all, harmony breeds wealth." Bufang slightly frowned. He glanced at Xiao Xiaolong and simply said, "They should be grateful to me for pointing out their shortcomings." Ouyang Xiaoi could not help but burst out laughing. Owner Bu's serious manner of spouting nonsense was too hilarious. Xiao Yinyu also covered her mouth and chuckled. A trace of captivating red appeared on her beautiful face. Bufang, on the other hand, was extremely puzzled. He was speaking the truth. The points he commented on were the most fatal flaws of these dishes. If he could improve on these flaws, the taste of these dishes would at least be raised to a whole new level. After a while, the aroma of the dishes drifted over. Elder Sister Chun swayed her hips as she leisurely walked over with the dishes in her hands. She was carrying a large round plate with flower crabs that emitted a fragrant aroma. These flower crabs were cut into 2 halves and then placed vertically on the plate. From afar, it looked like a splendid cluster of flowers. This is a very famous dish of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant's VIP area, the pan-fried flower crab. After Elder Sister Chun placed the dishes on the table, she looked at Bufang provocatively. Smelling the fragrance of the flower crabs, Xiao Xiaolong could no longer hold himself back. In the past, he would always order this dish whenever he visited the Immortal Phoenix restaurant. He picked up a flower crab and placed it into his bowl. He impatiently peeled off the shell and began to gorge himself on it. Bufang also picked up half a flower crab. The color of this flower crab was well controlled. The fragrance emitted from its red shell after it was pan-fried was quite appetizing. Bufang took out a pair of chopsticks and pried open the outer shell of the flower crab. The fragrant crab meat came into view. The white and tender crab meat was giving off faint steam, and with the contrast of the red outer shell, it added a bit of appetite. Bufang did not immediately start eating the crab meat. Instead, he used his chopsticks to scrape the crab butter within the shell. The crab butter was orange-yellow in color and was extremely tempting. Even though the aroma was not very strong, it was the essence of a crab. Bufang ate a mouthful of the crab paste that was left in the crab shell. He furrowed his brows and did not say anything. He then took another bite of the white and fragrant crab meat, his face still as solemn as before. After eating a mouthful of crab butter and crab meat, Bufang put down the flower crab without saying anything. "What's wrong? You can't point out any flaws, right? The dishes on the first floor are prepared for ordinary commoners, so you can definitely be picky. However, on the second floor, the dishes here are all prepared for distinguished guests, for the influential people in the Imperial City. How can you still be picky?" When Elder Sister Chun saw that Bufang was not speaking, she immediately began to mock and ridicule him. Xiao Xiaolong and the others were also startled and looked at Bufang in puzzlement. However, based on their understanding of Bufang, this guy would definitely not give up on the opportunity to use his venomous tongue. It's not that I don't want to say anything, but I have nothing to say. Is this the signature dish of your Immortal Phoenix restaurant's second floor? Bufang glanced at the complacent elder sister Chun and lightly said with a curl of his lips, "Let's not talk about how well the flower crab is cooked. Just the choice of flower crab is already a stain on this dish. The most important thing about the pan-fried flower crab is the choice of flower crab. The meat of your flower crab is not tender enough and is as light as water. With just one look, you can tell that it was artificially bred. The texture of the meat is hollow and the taste is much worse than that of a wild flower crab. Furthermore, there's the problem with the frying. The control of the oil temperature was not done well and the crab butter was overcooked, causing it to lose its aftertaste. Overall, I give it a bad review." It was not that Bufang did not want to say anything, but he was a little too lazy to do so. When he first heard about the pan-fried flower crab, he was still looking forward to it. However, after he took a bite, his expectations plummeted. It would not be an exaggeration to say that he had fallen from the sky into an abyss. Elder Sister Chun was stunned. Xiao Xiaolong and the others were also stunned. It turned out that there were so many flaws in this dish that they could not tell at all. Humph! Who doesn't know how to spout nonsense? Who knows if your review is correct or not? Elder Sister Chun coldly laughed. Bufang indifferently glanced at her before withdrawing his gaze. It's up to you whether you believe it or not. Hurry up and serve the other dishes. I've already lost my patience with your dishes. That's right. What did it have to do with Bufang whether Elder Sister Chun believed it or not? Bufang was only here to complete the system's quest, not to give Elder Sister Chun some guidance. Elder Sister Chun, what happened? What are you arguing about? Just as Elder Sister Chun was angered by Bufang to the point that her chest was heaving up and down, a slender figure slowly walked over and asked. When Elder Sister Chun saw the newcomer, her eyes immediately lit up and she said, "Boss Chien, hurry up and come over. This guy said that the dishes of our Immortal Phoenix restaurant are not well cooked." Chapter 71. Qian Bao was wearing a brocade robe. His hands were on his hips and his stomach was sticking out, exposing the dazzling jade-inlaid belt on his waist. He swaggered 8 steps forward in order to satisfy his vanity by feeling the envious gazes of others when they saw his belt. Who dares to shamelessly say that the dishes of my Immortal Phoenix restaurant are not delicious? Qian Bao was immediately unhappy when he heard someone say that the dishes of his Immortal Phoenix restaurant were not delicious. He walked to Elder Sister Chun's side and followed her gaze. He saw Xiao Xiaolong and the others. "Oh, isn't this the great scholar of our imperial city, young Master Xiao? I haven't seen you in a long time. Aya, Goddess Yenyu and little Princess Ouyang are here too. I apologize for not welcoming you earlier. And this is..." Qian Bao knew how to conduct himself, or rather, he knew how to do business. He had his own way of dealing with people. Simply put, he was very tactful. That was why he was able to build a small restaurant from scratch into the scale of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant. Of course, there were many people supporting him. However, Qian Bao's own hard work and talent were also indispensable. "You can just call him young Master Bu," Xiao Xiaolong introduced with a smile. Xiao Xiaolong introduced with a smile. He did not dare to reveal Bufang's name. Recently, the Black-Hearted store was flourishing within the Imperial City and had long become the Immortal Phoenix restaurant's biggest competitor. If he were to reveal Bufang's name at this moment, there was no guarantee that Qian Bao would ruthlessly kill Bufang. Young Master Bu? Qian Bao searched his mind and realized that there was no influential family in the Imperial City with the surname Bu. However, Qian Bao still cupped his hands at Bufang with a face full of smiles and said, so it's young Master Bu. I've heard a lot about you. May I know if the dishes of our restaurant do not suit your taste? It's not that it doesn't suit my taste, it's that the cooking is too lousy. I give it a bad review, Bu Fong said with a serious expression. Lousy cooking? Qian Bao looked at Bu Fong's serious face and could not help but be dumbfounded. It had been a long time since he met someone who dared to come to the Immortal Phoenix restaurant to find trouble. When the Immortal Phoenix restaurant was first established, there were quite a number of shills from other restaurants that came to pick a fight with them. It was only natural that their dishes were flawed. However, now, as the Immortal Phoenix restaurant developed, he spent a lot of money to hire chefs from all over the Light Wind Empire. Every chef had their own signature dish, which was why the Immortal Phoenix restaurant was now famous. Young Master Bu, you must be joking. Ask the entire Imperial City, who would dare to say that the dishes of my Immortal Phoenix restaurant are not delicious. Qian Bao was still smiling as he said this. However, his words were filled with a domineering aura. If it doesn't taste good, it just doesn't taste good. These dishes aren't well cooked. You can serve any dish to me and I can point out the shortcomings, Bu Fong said lightly. He didn't want to argue with Qian Bao too much. Bu Fong's words made Qian Bao squint his eyes slightly. This guy is really arrogant. How dare he say such nonsense? Could it be that he was really confident? Fine. Since young Master Bu is so insistent, I will serve a dish and let the chef confront you face to face. If you can convince my Immortal Phoenix restaurant chef, I, Qian Bao, will concede. Qian Bao withdrew the smile on his face and said in an indifferent manner. Was he planning to confront him face to face? Xiao Xiaolong and the others were slightly surprised. Then, they became extremely excited. Qian Bao didn't know who Bu Fong was, but they clearly knew that since Bu Fong dared to say such a thing, he was naturally confident. That was because Bu Fong's culinary skills were much better than the Immortal Phoenix restaurant's chef. No, I don't need your consent. How about this, let's make a bet. If I can convince your chef with the shortcomings I point out, you'll let us go to the 3rd floor of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant. On the other hand, if I lose, I'll compensate you with 100 times the price of these dishes. How about it? Bu Fong expressionlessly said. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. A compensation of 100 times the price. This owner Bu was indeed rich and overbearing. The total price of so many dishes here had already exceeded 500 gold coins. 100 times the price. That would be 50,000 gold coins. Even Qian Bao's heart trembled at this price. The gaze he used to look at Bu Fong no longer contained the slightest bit of contempt. How could a person who dared to take out 50,000 gold coins as a wager have such a simple identity? Furthermore, he was accompanied by Xiao Xiaolong and the other second-generation officials. It was obvious that his background was not simple. Was his goal to enter the 3rd floor of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant? Did he want to taste the dishes on the 3rd floor? Could it be that he was also planning to nitpick on the 3rd floor? At this moment, Qian Bao thought of many things. In the end, his eyes narrowed as he slapped the table and said, "Fine. I agree." Bu Fong nodded and gestured for Qian Bao to point out a dish at random. Qian Bao placed his hands behind his back and said to Elder Sister Chun, "Elder Sister Chun, get someone to serve the signature dish of our Immortal Phoenix restaurant's 2nd floor, dry-fried rock carp." When Elder Sister Chun heard Qian Bao's words, her eyes immediately lit up. The boss was indeed the boss. Once this dish was served, she wanted to see how this brat could nitpick on it. The dry-fried rock carp was the best dish on the 2nd floor of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant. Originally, it could have been promoted to the 3rd floor. However, because the boss stipulated that only 3 dishes could be served on the 3rd floor, the dry-fried rock carp was eliminated. However, regardless of its taste or appearance, the dry-fried rock carp was definitely qualified to be promoted to the 3rd floor of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant. Young Master Bu, please take a seat. Please wait for a moment, Qian Bao said to Bu Fang with a smile. He gestured for Xiao Xiaolong and the rest to sit down and wait for the dishes to be served. Bu Fang did not say anything. He merely sat on his seat and quietly waited for the dry-fried rock carp that Qian Bao mentioned. Qian Bao, on the other hand, was happily chatting with Xiao Xiaolong and the rest. After a while, a rich aroma drifted over, causing many of the diners on the second floor to stop and look at it. Elder Sister Chun carried a large plate over. Steaming hot steam was rising from the plate. This time, she did not even dare to move her voluptuous waist for fear of spilling the dish. Behind Elder Sister Chun was a plump fatty wearing a chef's coat. The fatty's face was filled with arrogance. The dry-fried rock carp is here. Please enjoy your meal, Elder Sister Chun coquettishly said as she bent down and placed the dish on the table. Boss Qian, I heard that someone came looking for trouble, so I came over to take a look. I want to see if this guy can point out any flaws in my dish. The fatty walked in front of Qian Bao and shouted in a loud voice. Bu Fang gave the fatty a glance. The fatty seemed to have sensed it and looked back at him. The muscles on his face were trembling. Are you the one who came looking for trouble? The fatty's senses were quite accurate. He glared at Bu Fang and said, Master Chen, this is young Master Bu. Don't scare him, Qian Bao said with a smile. Bu Fang was expressionless as he indifferently glanced at the fatty. His gaze landed on the dry-fried rock carp. The color was golden with a hint of red. A thick layer of sauce was mixed with many side dishes. The color was bright and eye-catching, and the aroma wafted through the air. The rich aroma of the deep-fried fish spread out, whetting one's appetite. Just from the appearance, this dish was not bad. Bu Fang picked up his chopsticks. Under everyone's gaze, he dipped them into the sauce and placed them in his mouth. Xiao Xiaolong and the rest held their breaths as they stared at Bu Fang. Master Chen and Qian Bao also swallowed a mouthful of saliva as they looked at Bu Fang. After Bu Fang tasted the sauce, he picked up a piece of fish and placed it in his mouth. After tasting it for a while, he put down his chopstick. From start to finish, Bu Fang's face was expressionless, making it impossible for others to see through his thoughts. The atmosphere suddenly became solemn. No one dared to breathe loudly. Chapter 72. Young Master Bu, how is the taste? After a long while, Bu Fang still did not speak. Xiao Xiaolong and the rest could no longer hold themselves back. Qian Bao even impatiently opened his mouth to ask as his eyes stared straight at Bu Fang. Master Chen also calmly watched with his arms crossed over his chest. This dry-roasted rock carp was his signature dish. He had cooked it for dozens of years and was already familiar with it to the peak. In his heart, it was already perfect. Bu Fang lightly exhaled and picked up a cup of water on the table. After drinking a mouthful, his gaze turned toward the crowd. He lightly opened his mouth and evaluated. Compared to the previous dishes that were full of flaws, this dry-roasted rock carp can be said to be on a higher level. Bu Fang's words immediately caused the crowd to relax. Xiao Xiaolong and the rest also grinned. Owner Bu actually opened his mouth to praise the dish. It seemed like the taste of this dish was pretty good. Since that was the case, they also had to give it a try. With this thought in his heart, Xiao Xiaolong directly picked up a piece of fish meat with his chopsticks and placed it in his mouth. The fragrant fish flavor immediately exploded in his mouth, and a faint spicy flavor spread out, causing his eyes to suddenly light up. Xiao Xiaolong nodded his head and said with a smile, "This dish is indeed pretty good. It is much better than the previous dishes." When Qian Bao heard this, his eyes immediately narrowed and he could not conceal the smile on his face. Since everyone praised this dish, it seemed like he had won this time. Qian Bao was extremely happy and elated to be able to easily earn 50,000 gold coins. Young Master Bu, that means this time, I have won, right? Qian Bao said to Bu Fang with a chuckle. However, Bufang's reaction made his heart skip a beat. He saw Bufang glance at him strangely, and the corners of his mouth seemed to be curled up into a faint smile. I only praised the taste of this dish. Compared to the previous dishes, it is indeed pretty good. However, it is only pretty good. There are still flaws. This time, everyone was stunned. Once again, they focused their attention on Bufang. They did not expect Bufang to make such a turn. The cooking process of this dry-fried rock carp is divided into 3 steps, right? The first step is to deep-fry the rock carp until its skin is wrinkled. The second step is to fry the ingredient. The third step is to cook the deep-fried rock carp together with the stir-fried side dishes. Bufang said slowly. Master Chen's eyes narrowed slightly, because Bufang's steps of analysis were exactly the same as his cooking steps. So what? These are only the general step. There are many more detailed processes within each step. These are the important parts of this dish. Master Chen sneered and said confidently. Bufang nodded, pointed at the dry-fried rock carp and said, "That's right. Then I will point out a few of your flaws from the details. First, when you are processing the rock carp, you should make 2 cuts on both sides of the fish's body, right? This is the first flaw. You should make the cuts according to the length and width of the fish. It is best to make 3 cuts on the fish's body length, 2 short cuts and 1 long cut. This will allow the fish to thoroughly absorb the flavor during frying and grilling." Master Chen frowned. All along, regardless of the size of the rock carp, he had always made 2 cuts. He had long gotten used to it and had never considered whether 3 cuts would be better. As for the depth of the cuts, I don't need to mention it. Next is the frying time. Because of the cuts, your rock carp was fried for a slightly longer time, causing the meat to age and causing the rock carp to lose its tenderness. The stir-frying of the side dishes is not bad because it doesn't require any skill. Lastly is the grilling problem. The grilling time is a few breaths short, the broth is not thick enough and the flavor of the fish is not deep enough. Bufang said indifferently. However, his words had already left Master Chen speechless. Originally, Master Chen wanted to retort, but after thinking about what Bufang had said, he realized that cooking it this way might have a better effect. Gulp. Master Chen swallowed a mouthful of saliva. His plump face was covered in sweat and his eyes were filled with disbelief. Was this guy a monster? How could he analyze so many flaws in his dish with just 1 taste? Xiao Xiaolong and the others were also dumbstruck. Owner Bu was amazing. Just 1 taste was enough to make the Immortal Phoenix restaurant's chef speechless. Master Chen. Is what he said correct? Qian Bao's expression had already become somewhat unsightly. He frowned and asked Master Chen, who was beside him, who was continuously dripping with cold sweat. Elder Sister Chen, who was standing not far away from Qian Bao, was completely dumbstruck. She did not expect this young Master Bu to actually be so amazing. He was able to make Master Chen break out in cold sweat with just a few words. Boss Qian. What young Master Bu said is indeed correct. I have cooked this dry-fried rock carp for dozens of years and I am very clear about the effect that every step will have on the taste. What young Master Bu said is indeed something that I have not thought of in all these years. Master Chen calmly accepted Bufang's guidance and said to Qian Bao with a sigh. Qian Bao was slightly dumbstruck. His entire being was in a daze. The 50,000 gold coins in his hands just flew away like that. Bufang glanced at the dumbfounded Qian Bao, stood up and expressionlessly walked forward. Xiaoyi, follow me. We are going to the 3rd floor. Wait for us. Xiao Xiaolong, Ouyang Xiaoyi and the rest immediately woke up from their shock and hurriedly chased after Bufang. Qian Bao also came back to his senses. His expression was somewhat unsightly. He clenched his teeth and turned his head to follow Bufang. Qian Bao brought the 3 of them to the 3rd floor. This was the most distinguished floor of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant. Normally, it was not open to the public. "Young Master Bu, please." Qian Bao's expression immediately turned serious. The previous scene had already shown that Bu Fang was not spouting nonsense, and that he was the real deal. The environment of the third floor was indeed much better than the second floor. The moment they stepped in, they could feel a rich amount of spirit energy drifting around. This Qian Bao actually spent a large sum of money to set up a spirit energy gathering magic array on the third floor. Xiao Xiaolong and the rest were immediately speechless. They had never been to the third floor before. This time, they stepped into the third floor with the help of Bu Fang and immediately felt that everything was extremely novel. "Young Master Bu, please take a seat first. I will get someone to serve the dishes." "There are only 3 dishes on the third floor of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant," Qian Bao said. Bu Fang nodded. He sat beside a rosewood square table on the third floor and quietly waited for the dishes to be served. Qian Bao's expression was solemn as he left the third floor to instruct the servants to prepare the dishes. Xiao Xiaolong and the rest were curiously looking around. Most people were extremely curious about new and novel things. However, Bu Fang sat there unmoving like a mountain. He closed his eyes and rested while waiting for the dishes to be served. About an hour later, Qian Bao returned. Beside him was a servant girl with a seductive and sexy figure. She was wearing a long gown that exposed her legs, and her fair and tender legs were faintly discernible. "Young Master Bu, this is the first dish of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant's sovereign area, red braised spirit pork." Bu Fang nodded. His gaze fell on the large round porcelain plate in front of him. On the porcelain plate, there was a bright red and glistening piece of pork that was emitting a rich meaty fragrance. At first glance, the pork was fat but not greasy. It was as exquisite and beautiful as a red jade. "This is the second dish of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant's sovereign area, sweet and sour ribs." Another beautiful servant girl with a seductive figure placed a dish in front of Bu Fang. When the lid was removed, the orange-red sweet and sour ribs came into view. Bu Fang raised his eyebrows and curled up the corners of his mouth in interest. Sweet and sour ribs? The third dish is also our Immortal Phoenix restaurant's supreme dish, colored glazed flour duck. As he spoke of the last dish, Qian Bao's tone became much more confident. He was extremely proud and naturally revealed his confidence in this dish. Bu Fang narrowed his eyes as he looked at the last dish. The duck that was standing proudly on the plate was filled with confidence. The duck's wings were slightly spread, as if it was about to flap its wings and soar into the sky. Its neck was raised, forming an S shape. Bu Fang blinked his eyes, and could not help but feel a little suspicious in his heart. This is roasted flour duck? Are you sure it's not a roasted duck that wants to fly into the sky? Chapter 73. Young Master Bu, according to the rules, you are not qualified to step onto the third floor of my Immortal Phoenix restaurant. Up until now, this sovereign area has only received the ministers of the imperial court, the emperor, and the princes. If it was not for the fact that I acknowledge young master's food appraisal ability, I would not have allowed you to step onto the third floor even if I had to act shamelessly, Qian Bao seriously said. He attached great importance to this sovereign area, and it was because of this that he was being cautious. If the general area and the VIP area were the foundation of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant in the Imperial City, then the sovereign area on the third floor was the foundation of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant's reputation in the Imperial City. Because Bu Fang easily pointed out the cooking process of the dry-roasted rock carp and the flaws that even Master Chen could not detect, Qian Bao seriously looked at Bu Fang. Bu Fang's appraisal could be considered as a slap in the face for the Immortal Phoenix restaurant. It was impossible for Qian Bao to swallow this loss. He had to get back at them, and the only way he could do so was to go to the third floor. Bu Fang glanced at Qian Bao and expressionlessly said, If an ordinary person wants to ask me to appraise their food, I might not be in the mood to deal with them. If it was not for the special circumstances, I would not even bother to try your trash dishes. Bufang's tone was extremely indifferent. Although his words sounded like mockery, there was not the slightest hint of mockery in them. It was as if he was merely stating a fact. Qian Bao immediately froze and was somewhat speechless. However, he suddenly smiled and narrowed his eyes as he said to Bufang, "Young Master Bu, please have a taste of these 3 dishes. These are the 3 top-notch dishes of our Immortal Phoenix restaurant." Xiao Xiaolong and the others blinked their eyes as they looked at the 3 dishes with some desire. The dishes of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant's sovereign area were usually not something they could even see. Although these dishes might not be as delicious as the ones in Bufang's store, those who came here to eat were not necessarily interested in the taste of the dishes, but rather their status and identity. Bufang first tasted the first dish, the red braised spirit pork. This was a dish cooked with spirit beast ingredient. Although the ingredients were only the meat of a low-end first-grade spirit beast, the chef's skills were pretty good. The meat was very refreshing and was not inferior to the dry-roasted rock carp at all. However, since it's the pork of a spirit beast, we have to be very careful in choosing the meat materials. It's a mistake to choose the meat of a battle boar for this dish. Battle boar is suitable for stewing, while flame boar is the best choice for braising. Also, there's a lack of control over the heat when braising. The sauce for braising is too sweet. After eating a mouthful of pork, Bufang expressionlessly put down his chopsticks and mercilessly evaluated the dish. In an instant, Bufang pointed out several flaws in this excellent dish. Qian Bao was dumbfounded. He quickly asked the maidservant to record down all the shortcomings Bufang had mentioned. Qian Bao was not surprised that Bufang had found so many flaws in the braised spirit pork. After all, this dish was about the same level as the dry-fried rock carp. "Young Master Bu, try this dish, sweet and sour ribs," Qian Bao said. However, to his surprise, Bufang's evaluation of this dish was extremely low. He found even more flaws than the braised spirit pork. Qian Bao was confused. Why? This sweet and sour ribs was obviously more delicious than the braised spirit pork. Xiao Xiaolong and the others pursed their lips and laughed. Showing off the sweet and sour ribs in front of Owner Bu, wasn't this just asking for a scolding? In their opinion, no one could surpass Bufang's sweet and sour ribs. Bufang did not pay attention to Qian Bao. He turned his gaze to the roasted flower duck that seemed as if it was about to ascend to the heavens. This plate presentation is a little interesting. The corners of Bufang's mouth slightly twitched. He took out his chopsticks and poked the duck's body. The slight elasticity was transmitted to Bufang through the chopstick. When Qian Bao saw that Bufang was about to eat his signature dish, the roasted flower duck, he immediately became spirited and clapped his hands. Thereafter, a maidservant with a voluptuous figure wearing a long gown that revealed her legs gracefully walked to Bufang's side, bringing along a wave of fragrance. Bufang furrowed his brows and coldly said, "Stay away from me. The fragrance on your body is affecting my judgment of this dish." The maidservant was slightly taken aback. Her beautiful face was filled with astonishment. Her hand that was holding onto the dagger stopped in midair, and she seemed to be at a loss as to what to do. Qian Bao was taken aback for a moment. Then, he slightly furrowed his brows. The reason he hired these beautiful maidservants was to serve those high-ranking officials and dignitaries. He even spent a large sum of money to buy high-grade rouge and face powder just to make these maidservants more attractive. He did not expect that his method would instead affect his appetite. He muttered to himself for a moment and dismissed the maidservant. Then, he personally held onto the dagger and began to process the duck meat. It was obvious that Qian Bao was quite experienced in processing this dish. His hands were steady and he quickly cut a piece of duck meat and handed it to Bufang. Wrapped in a piece of tissue paper, Bu Fong placed some vegetables in the tissue paper and dipped it in a little balsamic vinegar before swallowing it in one gulp. The flavor of the duck meat perfectly blended with the taste of the vegetables, bringing about an indescribable texture. Coupled with the chewy tissue paper, Bu Fong experienced an indescribable delicacy. He had to admit that the taste of this roasted flower duck was extremely good. Young Master Bu, how does the signature dish of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant taste? Qian Bao licked his lips as he looked at Bu Fong with a passionate expression. He did not believe that this dish, which even the Emperor called the #1 duck of the Light Wind Empire, could not conquer this fellow. This dish is indeed not bad. Bu Fong cut another piece of duck meat. This time, he did not mix it with the tissue paper and directly swallowed it in one gulp. He was also someone who enjoyed delicious food. Every chef was a true foodie. Then, young Master Bu, can you point out the flaws of this dish? Qian Bao took a deep breath and said while staring at Bu Fong. Bu Fong unhurriedly drank a mouthful of water and simply said, "This dish can be said to be the most perfect dish in the entire Immortal Phoenix restaurant. The taste is very good. I can guess that this dish was made strictly according to the steps in the recipe. Not a single word was missing and every single detail was meticulously made," Bu Fong said. Qian Bao's pupils abruptly shrank as he stood up and looked deeply at Bu Fong. His eyes were filled with disbelief. That was right. This roasted flower duck was a recipe that he had obtained by chance. It was because of this recipe that he was able to open the Immortal Phoenix restaurant to its current level and obtain the support of that noble person. It's true that you followed the steps of the recipe, but because it was too inflexible, it lacked some variation and neglected some important points. You have to know that every recipe is recorded after constant revision and experimentation. It's not perfect, and there's still room for improvement. Just like this dish, there's a mistake in the choice of ingredient. Choice of ingredients? That's right, the recipe asked you to choose an old duck, right? Moreover, a high-quality spirit duck. However, it is actually better to choose a young duck. The skin of an old duck is too tight and the meat is too hard. The texture is not as good as that of a young duck. As for the other flaws, they are not important, so I won't mention them, Bu Fong expressionlessly said. Qian Bao took a deep breath and calmed the shock in his heart. However, his expression was not very good. He did not agree with Bu Fong's statement. Young Master Bu, this roasted flower duck is our restaurant's signature dish and has withstood countless trials. I do not agree with your suggestion of using a young duck. I believe in the recipe more. Even though what Bu Fong said was very reasonable, Qian Bao would not believe it so easily. After all, how could a signature dish be changed so easily? Bu Fong glanced at him with a calm gaze. What does it have to do with me whether you believe it or not? I am merely evaluating the dishes. All right, since all the dishes have been evaluated, I will take my leave. Here is the money for the dishes. Bu Fong stood up, took out 5 crystals and placed them on the table. Then, he gracefully walked down the stairs. Qian Bao's expression was gloomy as he stood at the same spot. He looked at the 3 dishes on the table that had only taken a bite or so. His eyes were fluctuating with emotions. Young Master Bu, who exactly are you? Qian Bao took a deep breath and muttered to himself. Then, he looked at Xiao Xiaolong who was about to leave. Young Master Xiao, can you tell me who young Master Bu is? To be able to evaluate the flaws of a dish in such detail, he is definitely not an ordinary person. Could it be that he is an imperial chef from the imperial kitchen? Qian Bao cupped his hands and asked. Xiao Xiaolong was stunned. A mischievous smile appeared on his face. He squinted his eyes and said, "Isn't Owner Bu amazing? Not only does Owner Bu have great culinary skills, his evaluation of delicacies is also top-notch. I am truly impressed." Owner Bu? Qian Bao knitted his brows. Then, He narrowed his eyes and took a deep breath. Could it be that this person is the Black-Hearted Store's owner? Xiao Xiaolong mysteriously smiled. He did not reply to Qian Bao and turned around to chase after Bufang. At this moment, Bufang had his hands behind his back and was leisurely walking. The system's serious and solemn voice echoed in his mind. Congratulations to the host for completing the abrupt mission. Taste and evaluate the 13 dishes of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant and find out the flaws. The mission reward will now be issued. Chapter 74. After wrapping the scarf around himself again, Bufang walked out of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant. As soon as he walked out of the warm building, cold air assaulted his face, causing Bufang's entire body to slightly shiver. He involuntarily tightened the overcoat on his body. However, even though the temperature was very low, Bufang's heart was abnormally burning. That was because in his mind, the system announced that he had completed the quest and was about to issue the quest reward. A 10% true energy cultivation progress and an advanced cooking method for any of the Immortal Phoenix restaurant's dishes. These two rewards were extremely generous, so Bufang was naturally happy in his heart. Xiao Xiaolong and the others caught up and walked side by side with Bufang. Ouyang Xiaoyi and Xiao Xiaolong were chattering non-stop, constantly praising Bufang's miraculousness and awesomeness. With just a taste of a dish, he was able to render the Immortal Phoenix restaurant's chef speechless. Xiao Yinyu once again put on her veil, concealing her peerless appearance. She appeared very elegant as she quietly walked along. The four of them parted ways when they reached the entrance of the alleyway. Xiao Xiaolong and the others returned to their residences, while Bufang stepped into the alleyway and returned to his store. At the entrance of the store, Blackie was sleeping on its stomach. Even though Bufang had returned, he was still sleeping soundly. The quest reward has been issued. You have obtained 10% true energy cultivation progress, beginning to randomly draw a dish that has been evaluated. The system's serious and solemn voice rang out in Bufang's mind. Bufang was slightly startled. He narrowed his eyes and calmed down his mind. He was suddenly curious as to which dish he would draw. Of course, the dish that he least hoped to draw was the sweet and sour ribs, because it was already in his store's menu. In his mind, the names of the dishes rapidly flashed past and continuously changed. This was the system's random draw. Finally, the changing speed of the dishes slowed down and then stopped. Finally, they were clearly reflected in Bufang's mind. The dish drawn is pan-fried flower crab. After advancement, it is pan-fried tyrant flower crab. It was actually this dish. Bufang couldn't help but think of those rosy and fragrant flower crabs that were fried in oil. His mouth couldn't help but salivate. Compared to the sweet and sour ribs, the fried flower crabs were already considered pretty good. Because there was a sign on the door that said the store was closed for the day, many regular customers came in high spirits and left in disappointment. For example, Fatty Jean and the others. After waiting for a long time and realizing that the store was really not open, they left resentfully. The other customers were in the same situation. When Bufang returned to the store, he did not intend to open for business. It was already getting late, so he tidied up a little and stepped into the kitchen, preparing to cook the newly learned pan-fried tyrant flower crab. Phoenix Goddess Brothel. Qian Bao sat upright on the chair, holding his chin with one hand and frowning as if he was thinking about something. So young Master Bu is the owner of this Black-Hearted store? He actually came to the Immortal Phoenix restaurant and criticized all of our dishes. Who does he think he is? He doesn't even put our Immortal Phoenix restaurant in his eyes. Qian Bao clenched his fists and anger surged between his brows. Suddenly, he let go of his hand and sighed. But no matter what, this owner Bu's level is really high. He can analyze any dish with just one bite. It's simply terrifying. He originally wanted to send his chef to challenge Bufang's store. However, it seemed like he was lucky that he did not go. Otherwise, he would have lost a lot of face. This Bufang was obviously not on the same level as his Immortal Phoenix restaurant's chef. However, Qian Bao was very unwilling to do nothing because swallowing insults and humiliation was not his style. Wait a minute. Qian Bao seemed to have thought of something and his eyes immediately lit up. I can let the chef compete with him in knife skills. Without enough time to settle, knife skills cannot reach their peak. Even though they can't compare to Ownerbu in terms of cooking skills, they can use knife skills that require time to settle to defeat him. Qian Bao excitedly patted the table, and the corners of his mouth curled up. Finally, he laughed heartily. Very quickly, he ordered his men to gather all the chefs together. He wanted to select the chef with the best knife skills among them. Qian Bao had already witnessed Bufang's understanding and cooking skills, so he could only start with knife skills. Just as Qian Bao was starting to select the chef with the best knife skills, a blood phoenix chicken had already been quietly transported into the Crown Prince's palace. Inside the enormous Crown Prince's palace, the Crown Prince, Ji Chengan, was standing with his hands behind his back as he curiously looked at the iron cage in front of him. Inside the cage was a chicken whose body was overflowing with color like fresh blood. Is this a 5th-grade spirit beast, the blood phoenix chicken? It indeed has a unique appearance. The corners of Ji Chengan's mouth curled up as he nodded. Shusha respectfully stood nearby and said, "The blood phoenix chicken is a 5th-grade spirit beast and its speed is extremely fast. Even though its combat strength is very weak among the 5th-grade spirit beasts, it is not inferior to a 4th-grade battle spirit. It took quite some effort to capture it." "You've worked hard, Shusha." The Crown Prince turned around and said with a smile as he looked at Shusha. Shusha once again bowed and did not say anything. The blood phoenix chicken and the sage herb have all been prepared. The precious medicinal ingredients are almost all gathered as well. Now all we need to do is wait for Ownerbu to cook this elixir cuisine. If this elixir cuisine can make Father's body better, then my throne will be secured. The Crown Prince stood with his hands behind his back as he gazed at the main hall in the distance with a burning gaze. For the sake of this throne, he had sacrificed too much. Every step he took was like treading on thin ice because he was afraid that if he took a wrong step, that beloved younger brother of his would be able to use it against him and consign him to eternal damnation. Shusha, get ready. I will head to Ownerbu's store tomorrow. I must cook this elixir cuisine, the Crown Prince solemnly said. Before that, information regarding this elixir cuisine must be kept a secret. King Yu's people must not find out. Yes, Your Highness, Shusha respectfully replied. King Yu's manor. Within a secret chamber, King Yu, Ji Qingyu, opened his eyes and spat out a mouthful of turbid air. The true energy within his body was boiling like boiling water. After a long while, it calmed down and retracted back into King Yu's body. 6th-grade Battle Emperor is indeed difficult to break through. I've been stuck at this bottleneck for more than a year. King Yu let out a long sigh and felt somewhat helpless. However, cultivation could not be rushed and he did not have the slightest idea. After pushing open the door to the cultivation chamber, a figure shrouded in a black robe was standing at the entrance. A hoarse voice came from the figure's mouth. Your Highness seems to be troubled by the path of cultivation? Actually, if Your Highness were to cultivate our soul sex cultivation method, breaking through to 6th-grade Battle Emperor wouldn't be a problem. King Yu gave him a glance and sneered. Then turn into a monster that is neither human nor ghost like you? I am someone who is going to become the Emperor. How can I become as ugly as you? King Yu's words were somewhat harsh and unkind. However, this was also his usual way of speaking. The head elder of the Soul sect, Hun Qianyun, did not get angry after being reprimanded. Instead, he eerily chuckled. Suddenly, a figure walked in from outside the door and handed a secret letter to Ji Qingyu. Ji Qingyu nodded and directly opened the letter to read without any hesitation. As he read, his expression became somewhat serious. This elder brother of mine has really gone through a lot of trouble for the sake of this position. He even used this kind of method. Everyone is aware of father's condition, and it's impossible for him to reverse the situation. Yet, he actually placed his hopes on the elixir cuisine of a small store? What a joke! With a surge of true energy in King Yu's hand, the letter was immediately incinerated and eventually turned into ashes that drifted away. His eyes were extremely cold as he said, "Hun Qianyun, it's time for you guys to show your worth. If that elder brother of mine wants to prolong father's life, then I won't allow it. Tonight, bring some people with you to Bu Fang's little store and kill the owner. Remember, assassinate him without a sound. After all, that store is rumored to be a little unusual." Hun Qianyun laughed in his hoarse voice. "When it comes to assassination, if our soul sect claims to be second, no one in this world would dare to claim to be first. King Yu, just wait for my good news." Chapter 75. Head Elder, do you need us to take action? Behind Hun Qianyun, two soul sect experts wrapped in black robes asked. There seemed to be a spirit fire pulsating within Hun Qianyun's eyes, giving off an eerie feeling. It was as if they were facing a vengeful spirit that crawled out from hell. "Can't you see that His Highness King Yu is testing us? Even though King Yu has allied with our soul sect, he is still a member of the imperial court and we are from the sections. We are like fire and water to begin with. If it wasn't for the throne, King Yu wouldn't have dared to break the taboo and ally with us," Hun Qianyun simply said. The spirit fire in his eyes pulsated with every sentence he spoke. "Humans will always take risks for the sake of profit. This is the case regardless of your identity." "Then, Head Elder, what do you mean?" the two soul sect experts asked in puzzlement. A few days ago, Hun Qianduan and Xiao Jianwang escaped to that store and relied on the store's protection to stop Xiao Meng and Lian Fu who were pursuing them. The strength of that mysterious store is not something we can imagine. Rumor has it that the store is guarded by a 9th-grade supreme beast. King Yu's objective is for us to test the strength of that store. If we can kill them, that would naturally be the best, Hun Qianyun slowly said. However, even Xiao Meng and Lian Fu, two battle saints, were intercepted. For mere 6th-grade battle emperors like you to assassinate them, it's the same as courting death. The pupils of the two soul sect experts immediately constricted, and a chill suddenly rose from the soles of their feet. Let Along and Ah Hu go. Both of them are 5th-grade battle kings. They might be able to succeed by relying on our soul sect's cultivation method. Even if they fail, we'll only lose 2 battle kings, Hun Qianyun sinisterly said as he turned around. Night fell. The early winter night brought with it a penetrating chill. The gray clouds in the sky moved quietly under the blowing of the wind, covering the 2 round crescent moons that were echoing each other vaguely. Inside Fang Fang's little store, Bu Fang had already changed into a set of comfortable clothes. His long hair was tied up with a velvet rope and his forehead was clean and clean. Pan-fried tyrant flower crab. This dish tests the quality of the ingredients and the control of the heat during the pan-frying process. Bu Fang muttered as he walked into the kitchen. At this moment, he planned to start practicing the dish that he had randomly drawn, the pan-fried tyrant flower crab. Flower crab was a type of sea crab, belonging to the distant sea Portunus. Because of the little patterns on its shell, it was called flower crab. The flesh of flower crab was tender, slender, and white. It was as beautiful as a silverfish and was rich in nutrient. Of course, this was an ordinary flower crab. According to Bu Fang's understanding of the system, this tyrant flower crab was definitely not an ordinary flower crab. At the very least, it should be a spirit beast. When he arrived at the kitchen, there was a large water jar on the kitchen floor. There was no water in the water jar, but there was a giant flower crab with its legs and pincers tied up. This flower crab was very beautiful. Its entire body was a fiery red color, and the deep red patterns on its body intersected with each other, forming a dazzling and beautiful painting. Tyrant flower crab, a 5th-grade spirit beast found in the desolate sea region. Its attack power is extremely strong and its battle prowess is terrifying. It usually lives in groups and is one of the most terrifying groups in the desolate sea region. However, its flesh is delicious and it is an extremely good ingredient. The system solemnly and earnestly introduced the tyrant flower crab's information to Bufang. Bufang narrowed his eyes. He knew that this tyrant flower crab was definitely not an ordinary sea crab. The system's goal was to cook exquisite delicacies, so the ingredients provided were definitely top-notch. Bufang expressionlessly pulled out a sharp-edged kitchen knife from the table. The sharp-edged kitchen knife glinted with a cold light. Bufang casually twirled the knife in his hand, and it made a flower of knife light in his hand. The tyrant flower crab was tied up with a velvet rope and obediently lay in the water jar. It was hard to imagine that this was actually a 5th-grade spirit beast. Bufang flipped the tyrant flower crab over. The tyrant flower crab was still spitting out bubbles and was ignorant. After flipping the abdomen of the tyrant flower crab, Bufang stabbed the sharp kitchen knife towards the top of its abdomen. In that instant, the tyrant flower crab fiercely began to struggle. The crab's eyes rolled around non-stop and the bubbles coming out of its mouth increased. After around an hour, the tyrant flower crab finally stopped struggling. The velvet rope that was tied up with the large pincers was also slightly loosened. After removing the cover of the flower crab's abdomen and tearing it off, Bufang began to clean and process the tyrant flower crab. When everything was done, Bufang prepared a frying pan and poured some oil into it to heat it up. Taking out the heavy kitchen knife that he used every morning to train his meteor cutting technique, Bufang untied the velvet rope that was tied up the tyrant flower crab. When the temperature of the oil was just right, Bufang's gaze immediately sharpened. He ruthlessly chopped down with the heavy knife and directly cut the tyrant flower crab into 2 halves. The cut was incomparably brilliant. Bufang's hand speed was extremely fast. The instant the tyrant flower crab was cut open, he took advantage of the fact that the crab meat had yet to flow out and directly covered it on top of the frying pan. Sizzle, sizzle. A rich fragrance instantly spread out from the frying pan. That was the reaction of the crab meat and crab meat coming into contact with the hot oil. Next was the control of the heat. Regarding this, Bufang was still very experienced. Even though the tyrant flower crab was huge, it was not a problem for Bufang. Soon, the pan-fried tyrant flower crab was done. The 2 halves of the tyrant flower crab were placed on the plate. Their outer shells became even more scarlet. Under the cover of the oil, they flickered with a bit of brilliance under the illumination of the lamplight. The crab meat was extremely fragrant after being pan-fried. Coupled with Bufang's control of the heat, the crab meat was white and tender. It was emitting hot steam and it greatly stimulated one's appetite. Bufang licked his lips and wiped off the water stains on his hands. Then, he sat on a chair and began to gorge himself. As expected, it is 100 times more delicious than the Immortal Phoenix restaurant's pan-fried flower crab. How can my culinary skills be so amazing? As Bufang ate, he calmly thought to himself. The amount of half a tyrant flower crab was just right for Bufang. Therefore, the remaining half entered Xiao Bai's stomach for recycling. After tidying up everything, Bufang stretched his waist and yawned. After eating for an entire day, he was a little tired. It was time for him to rest early. Maintaining sleep was extremely important for a young man who wanted to become the god of cooking. The lights were extinguished and everything returned to darkness and silence once again. Deep into the night, the sound of 2 figures piercing through the air suddenly came from outside the alleyway. In the darkness of the night, two pitch-black figures were almost impossible to catch with the naked eye. The two of them were extremely agile. Sticking close to the bluestone walls of the alleyway, they practically did not make the slightest sound as they walked. Bufang's store was divided into two floors. The first floor was the store's business area while the second floor was filled with many rooms with windows. Bufang's room was one of them. Bufang's room was very comfortable. With a wide open window, sunlight could shine through the window and it was extremely warm. However, because it was currently winter, Bufang tightly locked the window to prevent the cold wind from blowing in. The aura of the two figures was almost completely restrained. Each of them was on one side of the window. At the entrance of the store, Blackie, who was sleeping soundly, suddenly twitched its nose. It opened its sleepy and hazy eyes and glanced upward. Eh? What are two little mice of the 5th grade doing here in the middle of the night? Their cultivation technique is quite peculiar. It's a pity that they met me, the Lord Go. However, they are only two little mice of the 5th grade. I, the Lord Go, am too lazy to deal with them. Woof. I'm so sleepy. Blacka let out a snort and continued to bury its head as it fell into a deep sleep. A light flashed in the eyes of the two battle kings from the Soul Sect. One of them placed his hand on the window, and the window immediately opened. The two of them looked at each other in surprise. It seemed like they did not expect things to be this easy. However, they did not have the time to think too much about it. The two of them scuttled into the room as light as swallows. Chapter 76. When the two of them landed on the ground, the windows were naturally shut without making the slightest sound. They were very experienced in assassinations. They had even assassinated ministers of the imperial court before. They did not care about the owner of a small restaurant at all. If it was not for their leader solemnly reminding them to be careful during this mission, they would not even bother to be so cautious. After all, their target was too weak. The place that Along and Ah who entered was not the bedroom where Bufang was. The room was cold and empty, without a single person in sight. Along slightly narrowed his eyes and pointed forward. Their figures flashed and they pushed open the door. When the door was pushed open, it actually did not make the slightest sound. Everything was done in silence. After walking out of the room, the two of them arrived at a corner. The left corner was where they would go downstairs. The stairs were gloomy and gloomy, as if it could swallow a person's soul, causing them to involuntarily feel terrified. Along swallowed a mouthful of saliva and forced himself to retract his gaze. Their gazes fell on a tightly locked door in front of them. They looked at each other and were both delighted. From within the door, they could hear the sound of steady breathing. It seemed like the owner of the small restaurant was in that room. They gently pushed the door, but it did not open. It was obviously locked. Along was not in a hurry. He took out a thin and long iron wire from his bosom. The true energy in his body surged and covered the surface of the iron wire with a thin layer. He inserted the iron wire that was covered with true energy into the keyhole. Then, the true energy changed and directly filled the keyhole. With a slight twist, a slight click, the door opened. So easy? Along was surprised again. He felt that it was not as dangerous as his leader said. The two of them pushed open the door and looked inside. They could not see anything in the darkness. The two of them frowned and planned to sneak in and immediately launch a fatal attack. However, suddenly, the two of them felt a chill all over their bodies. They wanted to take a step forward, but they also froze on the spot. It was a chill that spread from the bottom of their hearts and instantly covered their bodies. It was like a cold wind blowing from an extremely cold place. The two of them suddenly opened their eyes wide, and their pupils shrank to the size of beans. They did not dare to move in the slightest. Two red rays of light bloomed from behind them and locked onto their bodies. Who is it? Along's entire body began to tremble. He turned his head with great difficulty and looked back, just in time to meet the red light, Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flickered with a red light. It raised its mechanical hand and directly grabbed the two men's necks, easily lifting them up. Sensing target's killing intent towards master. Searching for a solution. The processing plan has been locked. Activate immediately. Plan, kill. Rays of light shot out of Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes, as if it was searching for some data. Then, the plan was confirmed, and Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes instantly turned dark purple. The mechanical arm exerted force. Along's face was full of fear as he struggled. He wanted to break free from the steel-like mechanical hand. He wanted to urge the true qi in his body, but every time the true qi poured into his hand, it would dissipate before he could strike. Along felt the steel clamp around his neck becoming tighter and tighter. His struggle also became more and more intense, and he unconsciously spat out dark red blood. Xiao Bai was not the slightest bit bothered by the two men's fearful gazes. It was as cold as a grim reaper looking down on the common people. Its purple mechanical eyes appeared extremely demonic in the darkness. Crack! With two crisp sounds, Along and whose struggling movements came to an abrupt halt. Then, their bodies went limp and their heads drooped down powerlessly. Dark red blood flowed down and dripped onto the ground, emitting a cold sound. Xiao Bai indifferently turned around. Carrying the two limp men, he left Bufang's room. The door closed tightly, and the bloodstains on the ground also disappeared into thin air. Bufang sniffled and raised his hand in a daze. He picked his nose, smacked his lips, and continued to sleep. Bang bang! Two corpses fell from the sky and fell onto the limestone floor of the alleyway. Fresh blood flowed out. Blackie raised its head with sleepy eyes and glanced at the two corpses. It wrinkled its nose and let out a snort. It opened its mouth and lightly exhaled. The two figures were blown out of the alleyway by a gust of wind and were thrown onto the main street. After doing all of this, Blackie contentedly lay back down and went back to sleep. Within King Yu's manor, the candlelight was gently swaying. An old and skinny figure wrapped in a black robe was profoundly staring at the flickering candlelight. His eyes were filled with two emerald spirit fires. Suddenly, the spirit fires in Han Qianyun's eyes dimmed and the sound of something shattering rang out. A soft sigh came from his mouth. As expected, that store really can't be provoked. Along and Hu died just like that. Two figures silently appeared in front of Han Qianyun and respectfully saluted him. Along and Hu are dead. Go to the alleyway and collect their corpses. We've failed the assassination this time. I'll go apologize to King Yu right now. Han Qianyun walked out of the room while trembling with his body hunched. The two battle emperors from the Soul sect were in disbelief. They had already solemnly warned Along and Hu before they took action. However, how long had it been, and the two of them were already dead? A 5th-grade battle king could not even struggle? The two of them looked at each other and could feel the fear in each other's eyes. Your Highness, the assassination this time has failed, Han Qianyun indifferently said to King Yu with his back hunched. King Yu was wearing a luxurious robe with his hair draped over his shoulders. He had a tranquil expression on his face. He gave Han Qianyun a glance and the corners of his mouth curled into a smile. I understand. I will give your subordinates a proper burial. You may leave now, King Yu softly said. Han Qianyun's spirit fire slightly flickered. Without saying anything, he turned around and left. There was not the slightest pressure or aura coming from his body. He was like an ordinary old man with one foot in the grave. However, King Yu did not dare to underestimate him. Han Qianyun was the #1 expert in the Soul sect. He had a profound cultivation level and was an expert in the way of the soul. It was said that he had already stepped into the realm of 7th-grade battle saint. However, there were also people who said that he was only at the peak of 6th-grade battle emperor. As he watched Han Qianyun's figure disappear, King Yu's gaze gradually became playful. This old fox is truly ruthless. He actually used the lives of 2 battle kings to express his sincerity. Very well. Then I will believe you for the time being. The corners of King Yu's mouth curled up in an extremely demonic manner. Fong Fong's little store. What kind of secret is this store that suddenly appeared? Compared to the Soul Sect, King Yu suddenly realized that he was even more curious about that store. The night passed peacefully. Early in the morning, as usual, Bu Fong woke up early. He first went to the kitchen and began his daily cutting technique training. He held a heavy kitchen knife and rapidly cut up a large radish. After he finished practicing his cutting technique, Bu Fong began to cook sweet and sour ribs as breakfast for Blackie, the lazy dog that was going to become a pig sooner or later. Fatty Jin's army of fatties arrived in a grandiose manner. Their faces were filled with eagerness. Bu Fong had been closed for the entire day yesterday, and they were extremely hungry. After getting used to the dishes of Bu Fong's store, the dishes of other restaurants were simply tasteless. Owner Bu, you're finally open. Oh, you have a new dish. Come, give me a portion of everything. Fatty Jean ordered the dishes with great familiarity. Bu Fong expressionlessly nodded. He walked toward the kitchen and began his daily business. Ouyang Xiaoyi braved the cold wind and arrived at the store. She rubbed her hands together and took off her furry overcoat and hat, revealing her rosy little face. The interior of the store was heated automatically. It was quite warm and extremely comfortable. Bu Fong cooked while Xiaoyi served the dishes. The coordination between the two of them was getting better and better. At the entrance of the alleyway, King Yu, who was dressed in a brocade robe, slowly walked in. He had an imposing appearance and an extraordinary temperament. He stepped into the store and indifferently sized it up. This was King Yu's first time at Bu Fong's store, so he was quite intrigued. In particular, the sky-high prices of the dishes on the menu made King Yu ponder. After ordering a jar of Ice Heart Jade Urn wine and a plate of sweet and sour ribs, King Yu began to savor the delicacies of Bu Fong's store. While he was at it, he was waiting for the Crown Prince to arrive. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.